Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Saturday, January 11th, 2025. I feel like I said for you last time. Thank you for joining me today. Now, I'm going to be getting into the fire conversation today. You guys know well on my general opinion around the weather aspect, whether, let's just say, acts of God conversation, and how those tend to be used in the partisan conversation. Now, I told you I would be talking about this because I'm always interested to see what people are discussing. And we'll start at the base level of things like government malfeasance. And even I argue just like weather manipulation, these things should not be disregarded today, but, objectively looking through these things. We're going to talk about that in a large part today, but I'm going to say right out of the gate, it may not be exactly the conversation that many of you want, but for me, it's undeniable to decouple any of the stories we've seen, from fog to drones to any of these things, from the undeniable reality of the partisan, on overdrive, on steroids, partisan manipulation that we've been seeing. And it's really important to see it that way. Probably by design. This is probably some long-term effort to get maybe even people like myself to do exactly what I'm doing, to be overly objective in this case, but it's still important to ultimately do so, to not err on the side of falling into those traps of assumption and what's popular and what, it's everywhere right now. And this is why even jokingly kind of coined the irritatingly objective point, because really I just see it as being objective. But it's at a time where there's so little of it out there in the partisan field that it becomes frustrating for people to have to feel like they constantly have to check. Well, that's what we should always be doing. Always. And so today we're going to go over what I think is provable. We're going to go over the information around kind of what we've discussed around these in the past, something that I really want to make a huge point about, which in a way will only bolster the point that this is Democrat bad, only Democrat side of the Great Reset, despite the fact that globalism, the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum, these are bipartisan concepts that only one aspect of the very aggressive partisan element is trying to make you think is only about one side, while that part of the partisan element just got fantastically exposed themselves, like they did it to themselves in regard to the North American Union conversation, in regard to the H-1B conversation, and are just powering forward with their, team sport politics side that just will not deviate from what they say we should be talking about. Now, what's important around this conversation is the malfeasance right out of the gate, like we saw with Lahaina, like we saw with any number of other conversations where in many ways, it tends to become something, people looking for something bigger than the obvious we can see in front of us. Interestingly enough, this time it kind of seems to be a mixed bag, but I think it's because I give you an opinion right out of the gate that I think right now, the side that seems to be kind of wanting this to be only one side of the story is fixated on the basic level, I think, because they're trying to deviate or rather distract from kind of what I'm going to get into to start today. This, as I recently coined the partisan, I didn't coin, it's been said before, I would argue, but I used the phrase, the partisan implosion, which was around that conversation. And I think there's a lot happening right there, that the partisan, again, as I see it, the control structure, your government, that uses the left-right paradigm to keep you distracted, keep you divided, keep you in chaos, that element is pretty uncomfortable right now. And you all see it. Anybody out there trying to tell you they don't notice a lot of these shifting opinions, conservatives kind of flocking to say, Elon, we don't trust you anymore. Many conservatives starting to go, what's going on with Trump's decisions? Still probably supporting him, which seems to be very difficult to decouple, but very, very, very clearly going, I don't know about those people. I don't know about all the Zionists. I don't know about all the technocrats. I don't know about all the deep state contract. I don't know about all the merchants of death. Everything that we once thought. You guys, we've talked about it a lot. We're going to start today with a point around a very interesting rebranding that you've all seen, whether it's Rogan and Zuckerberg. It's a fascinating thing to watch for those that are nonpartisan, sort of just objectively watching all this rapidly evolve. And interestingly, people that if I would have come out and told you, like Zuckerberg or people like this, before this had happened, they would have said, you crazy, that would never happen. He's a deep state monster. Now suddenly, no, it's yay, uniparty's on our side. And it is fascinating, but kind of terrifying to watch how quickly people can be played. And of course, I could be wrong. That's always possible. And we're going to talk about it totally not connected, which you might not expect, to the fire conversation. We're going to talk about smart dust a bit again. Actually, there's only one connective point just to segue, but it really, as far as I can tell, as much as it gets kind of thrown out recently around the fog. I'll use Allison Morrow's interview she just had with me to start that conversation, because she had a video from, I don't know, 2 years ago where we talked about smart dust, maybe a year ago. I forget the exact, but a while ago, that it got basically 0 views. And then all of a sudden it jumped up and became one of the most viewed videos she's seen for that she has for like a week, and then dropped back down to nothing. Now, that's not just because of the partisan discussion, you understand, because it wouldn't be 0. She's got over 100,000 subscribers. So what's going on right there? Clearly, this is a conversation that I think, as you well know, that I think is monumental to where this goes. In fact, terrifyingly enough, I think is very real and active and in our lives right now. And that shoe is going to drop very soon, which is why they kind of are trying to give it the old Alex Jones effect and be like fog and drones and stuff that we want you to think in many cases actually doesn't connect, in order to sort of bury that smart dust conversation in, the Stu Peters era of the world, or rather zone, which we'll make a point about in a minute. And again, talking about blue dumpsters and direct energy weapons and all things that, by the way, are very real, but using these things to basically bury what we should be looking at, in my opinion. But all that will come together in one picture today, and you'll see how. But it's important for us to very discernment more than ever, because as I tend to do with these conversations, as I was kind of starting with, because of all the just mania out there right now, that I think it's important to go with what we can prove, and to start with, here's where I think we're being misled. Here's where I think this makes the most sense. And here, just to be objective, is all the evidence that would ultimately bolster the narrative circulating in the Republican side of this, or partisan side, depending on what the conversation is, which we've gone over in the past during Lahaina conversation. The what seems to be circulating yet again today, the wildfire as a military weapon, DARPA program. I mean, these are real things. We've talked about that during Lahaina. So it's important to not pretend like just because I'm saying that these people are, I think, very clearly trying to play you, doesn't mean that couldn't also be a real conversation. That right there is what causes a lot of frustration for people, as if because we know it could be, that means this is that. You guys all see that right now online. It's everywhere. And I'm going to read a great tweet from Carrie Wedler that she always just seems to be able to cut right through the BS and just make this point. Look, you guys, I am open to all of this, is which, her and I, a lot of people, and I think the nonpartisan objective field are very much in the same mindset. We dismiss very little. In fact, it's about being open to everything, but are unwilling to be guided along by what looks like it could be, or the feelings, the gut aspect, which all matter, but are not proof. And that's what's important. So, as well as, by the way, you guys have something you want to jump in the chat, I'll try and pay attention today, because I think that if there's new developing information around this that is more than the usual kind of, government malfeasance, which we'll get into, which again is just it is a story. What California's done, and by the way, it's not only a partisan thing. California is clearly Gavin Newsom, but the ongoing water overlap in the EPA and multiple administrations in the same dynamic, which borderline money laundering, even my honest opinion. But ultimately, that there's a lot of malfeasance. But I really don't think that's unique to Democrats. I really don't think that's unique to California. It just so happens that we have a focal point, so we're all digging through the malfeasance. You could do this with just about every governor, every state in this country. I genuinely think that. Doesn't change the fact that we need to highlight the criminal that is Gavin Newsom, and the ongoing federal government continuing, I guess, the synergistic, they do it together, is the point I'm trying to make with words that I could have used much simpler. The point is, obviously, this is something that's not one side, is what I'm trying to say. And I think that's super important. But let's just get right into some opening points about censorship that I think are important. And I guess a few random opening points. Let's get into that. And we're going to start with the partisan implosion, the great rebranding, which I really think everyone's, undeniably seeing right now. It's very, very strange. But let's start with this censorship point. But I just want to shout out, because I haven't really looked too much into this. I do know Sam, and I know that this is a person who works with Sam, and ultimately, I'll just explain. I'll show you what they were saying in this thread. Just point being, at this point, it looks like Sam is trying to find out what happened. This was yesterday. Somebody's sharing, so for the podcast, Johnny Woodward, about 17,000 followers, account suspended. Which, by the way, on a quick side note, it's strange to me. Have you noticed this? That sometimes people get removed and it says suspended. But then we've already seen examples, and I just was talking about one I didn't mention on the show. I forgot to bring it up, but where somebody we know that was censored. It was very public. They got censored. They got removed, but the account said no longer exists. Interesting, right? Because that easy way to kind of make it look like, well, I mean, even I go, well, is this the wrong link? Is this a different person? Or did they delete their account, right? Like, you never know. I think that's on purpose. So my point is, I think it's interesting. We've seen people that were censored and you get different, kind of like how I try to do things on this platform, even though I never follow through with it because my intention is not to actually do it, but just to test them. I get confronted with Authentics, Israeli intelligence verification when I go through Twitter. And I've watched live other people, and they show that Stripe is being presented to them. How do you explain that? Why in the world would they use both Authentics and Stripe simultaneously? Unless that's an Israel manipulation through that platform and they're focusing on certain people, or I could theorize all day, but that's interesting to me. Now, back to the point. Censored on this platform. The free speech savior censoring continually. Now, this is a person who's, you look for yourself through the conversations they've had. It seems to be an anomalous thing when you're being told it's all about free speech. Now, this person says a page called Tea Party Media is sharing this in their Discord, bragging about mass reporting Johnny. And this is as simple as it works. This is how it works, guys. That's not supposed. If this is a free speech platform, how is it possible that all it takes is a bunch of people to just flag you enough to where they respond? You know what that sounds like? Exactly like the old Twitter, with a little bit of a different veneer. That's what it looks like to me. You guys can decide for yourself. But it says, you've been submitted a report for abusive behavior. Is that really all it takes? Enough people going, this guy abused me? It's clearly not the reality, seeing as how we've had people that are pretending to be TLAV. Some of the most childishly abusive and ridiculous people, which I'm not trying to censor their voice, simply trying to highlight they're pretending to be TLAV, which is a violation of their terms of service, proving it to them. Other people are reporting it, and they say there's no problem here. It's selective, guys, because I'm not a friend. They're not a friend to me. I'm not a friend to them. I can see what they are, what they're doing. So they choose to ignore it. I think that's pretty clear. It's my opinion. But in this case, mass abuse, according to them. And you guys, I'll follow up. I've reached out to Johnny to Sam to find out if this was, if he had figured out if there's anything more to this. Let me double check, see if he responded. I'm sure not yet, but I'll let you know if he gets back to me. And nonetheless, the point is that's not free speech, guys. As simple as that. Another note on just the weirdness of people trying to, like Whitney's repersoning the interview, which you should watch. It's a big deal. This happens all over the place. And my opinion is these platforms not only don't do anything about it, they lean into it for, I think, reasons we're going to find out more as we go forward. Not in the show, but in general. But this is on Telegram. And these people are just relentless. I delete them every time I get a chance. These people are not only pretending to be TLAV, that's a fake account, quoting me, which is the real one in there, and simply saying, I'll be leaving this here for some minutes. Some minutes. It's a it's people. It sounds like an Israeli bot to me, if I want to be honest. It's a platform that has been beneficial to my associates, and I too, you can check it out. Fantastic. So anybody with a modicum of sense is going to be like, well, one, that doesn't sound like Ryan. Two, he never does this. But people respond. People fall for it, guys. It says, you'll definitely thank me later. I didn't click it. I don't think anybody else was stupid enough to do it either. But it's usually some crypto scam or something like that. So just be aware that this is being, constantly done. And what it really needs to show you, as I was just commenting in there, I don't think it have it. It doesn't, you can't see it. But it's clear what a threat people that are doing this work are to them. Whoever they are, people that are recognizing, like, why go to the extent to infiltrate these kind of groups and bomb it with stuff? And really, that's not going to bet. I'm not talking about the crypto scams. I'm talking people that go in there and just pretend to be me and say dumb things. What's the point there? What are you trying to accomplish? Why go to so much effort to do it as we keep seeing it happen? Maybe they're just having fun, trying to troll whatever their dumb game is. But at the end of the day, I know you guys agree that to a level, it's about trying to hurt the perception of people that are calling certain things out. And I think we all know that. Oh, and this was, somebody sent me this. This is interesting to me. And I can't verify this, but I wanted to put it out there in case you guys saw it. They said they were going to basically get back to me if they end up being able to catch it live again. But it just says, just a heads up that I'm virtually certain that an AI rendition of your voice is being used at Rumble ads that play during your show. Pretty sure I've heard Jimmy Dore's voice used as well. Now, that's his opinion based on a voice. Really hard to know for sure. Voices can sound similar. Nonetheless, I think it's interesting where we're going in this world. And I just want to point that out. like I'm going to get to later in the show if we end up getting to it, depending on certain. Oh, I forgot to say that since we're still in the opening. I just want to give a little disclaimer that we have. I don't know if you guys know the last couple of days. I mean, I didn't have internet spotty for the last couple of days. We got about 5 inches of snow, and it's been I love the snow, but it's funny to me. I lived in Idaho, lots of snow. Seemed like it didn't disrupt anything. It seemed no matter what would happen, everything was fine. In Tennessee, it seems to snow every year, but weirdly enough, when it does, everyone seems to lose their minds and everything stops. It's like, can we not plan for this anyway? We know it's going to happen. Point being, I'm worried even today if it does go out, just even though because there's still snow on the lines and so on. I might cut it short if that happens, or it might just be waiting. I might jump back in. Just heads up, if it does cut out, that will be why. I just want to let you guys know. And so my point on this, back to this, was ultimately this is interesting with where we're going. And I was referencing a tweet that I'm going to get to later if we have time. And that's why I went back to that point about depending on what happens today. Donald Trump, an AI deep fake video. Very, very obvious, but people still seem to fall for it. I just think we're going in a very weird direction. And I know people are, I think it's almost like we're getting too comfortable with the background elements of these things where I guys have said many times, I'm waiting for that shoe to drop. When is that deep fake shoe really going to drop? And I feel like it's been around for a very long time. And now I'm waiting for the nanotech smart dust level for for that shoe to drop. But just keep an eye out for this. If you see this, let me know. But just as a thought experiment, what would that mean? If there's people out, people pretend to be me on Telegram, people pretend to be Whitney on different channels, all of a sudden they start doing like literal AI deep fake versions of like audio podcast or even just video interviewing people. How are you ever let's be clear. I don't even mean like high level intelligence level, like things that you could buy today that can produce deep fakes that are damn very hard to tell. What if they made a whole video of one of us doing something like this? Like not even something nefarious, just having an interview with somebody that was producing an opinion that we didn't agree with. You know how hard it would be to convince people that wasn't you? I don't know why we haven't got there yet. Now, before we get into everything else, I wanted to give a shout out to, I won't necessarily, I forget, I don't know if he wants me to say his name or not, but just really appreciate the person for reaching out. And they were recently traveling and basically exclusively wore the TLAV clothing as they were traveling. Really appreciate that, man. Here, a couple pictures he sent, chimney tops, TLAV. This is one of my favorite ones right there. A little TLAV on it. Awesome. And then this one too. This one is in Tennessee. Question everything. Very cool, man. Very cool. And so I just appreciate that. I mean, if he's okay with it, I might even use them for some of the new ones we're going to be doing. But on that note, in general, make sure you remember that right now, truthclothing.io is on the way out. Just by their own choice. They're moving on different things. And so I wish them the best. And I really appreciate what they've done so far. But so as you'll see, everything's on sale right now. And some of them are blanked out because they're going to be done. They're no longer like here. They won't be coming back, at least on this platform. So they're basically trying to sell out everything. Until they sell out, these things won't be available again. We're going to try to reproduce them somewhat on this new shirt clothing store, which is tlavfreespeech.itemorder.com/shop/home. Let me see if it's just this. It's Big Frog clothing. Yeah, there we go. So basically just that. So it's tlavfreespeech, one word, .itemorder.com. And then you can get the free Truth Conquers All t-shirt or the Free Speech Absolutist t-shirt or the They t-shirt and eventually all the other ones we want to bring over there. Anyway, the point is if you want to get these ones now, you won't find this discount for a long time. And I wish them the best over there. Hopefully we get some more new things coming this way. Now, talking to start with the partisan implosion conversation. I mean, I think this is an objective reality. I think we all saw, for those of us calling the two-party illusion, it was like, thank God, people starting to finally see through what is just like, in my opinion, just cartoonishly obvious these days. But it was pretty clear. The H-1B thing really kicked it off. Elon censoring people. I mean, it's weird how it's almost like we already forgot about that, at least in the people that want to. There's no questioning this, guys. He literally just kind of tantrum censored people. They kind of patched up a few of them and let Laura Loomer back on. And then she started going, you're good again. You're my favorite again. Right. Not really. But the point is that, pandered to them to get back on the platform. But it's just obviously not what was being presented. And it's only gotten worse from there. So today, what we're getting further on from this is this kind of rebranding, which might have been by design, guys. The kind of disillusion, the breaking up What's a better word for it? Like the idea that they want to kind of break down the way you see these things in order to sort of rebuild them, which is classic. Order out of chaos, whatever you want to talk about, this is what they do. So we'll start with Orwell's tweet here. We'll use this for the picture today, which a lot of people have used this because it's interesting. Even mainstream articles have used it. And she just writes, it's basically, if you're on the podcast, it's the picture for the show today. And it's Trump very kindly speaking with Obama, who's chuckling about something he's telling him. And it says, the meme says, I got them to cheer for the New World Order, which is pretty perfect. And here's a clip she shares. Hotspot. This is how Trump responded. So people are asking him, right? Because you know why I think this is so interesting to start? Even the corporate media, and this is Fox, what's his name? You recognize the voice, asking him. The reason I think they're even asking this question is because all of us, everybody has been berated nonstop from every angle with the idea from Trump and Vance and their entire team and the Joneses and all the rest that are behind them that the deep state, Democrat, pedophiles are hating all of them. That Obama and everybody, I mean, that Biden and everything, and they're trying to do every single thing they can to ruin them. And then they have agreements and deals and talk and work out a deal with Ukraine and chuckle with each other. Yeah. And then anybody starts going, well, hold on a minute. And usually they just kind of go, well, they're putting on a face. And no, but the point is, these things matter. It shows you the illusion for people like us that are been trying to tell you for a long time. They're the same thing. They have different opinions and different policies, but it's one government of control. And they all ultimately know that. And that's why you see the dinners with the Clintons and the Obamas and the Trumps. And it goes back a long way. Or that they all circle around the Epstein guy. Weird, isn't it? Here, listen to it and listen to the way he responds. I think it's very telling. Almost like he doesn't want to have to say it, but nonetheless does really say it. And I think there's a reason for that. I think it's because they are trying to, under the guise of what in any other circumstance Republicans themselves would have called out as ridiculous, but now it's useful, try to play the idea of the unity part, but we're the ones trying to fix it all. They're the ones dividing, even though they're both actively so full of vitriol against anything Democrat or anything Republican that it's embarrassing that they would even say that. But nonetheless, anytime it works for them, well, it's a unity party. We're fixing everything. Bring on Zuckerberg and Bezos and everybody. Come on, Clinton. Everybody, it's a unity party. It doesn't make sense. As much as we would all want that, if it was actually real and people were actually like, why wouldn't we want there to be no division and everybody, and again, if they were working in our interest, which I don't think that's the case, even if they are working together. But again, we come back to the point of which I'm saying that they always have been. Hopefully you followed that. The point is, ignore all the BS, guys. These people are on the same side. And I think that's quite obvious if you've been paying attention or you're starting to pay attention now. It's falling apart in front of them.
Off the top, you mentioned the Carter funeral today. What were you talking to Barack Obama about?
It did look very friendly, I must say.
See, it's an interesting response, isn't it? Because that's not supposed to be what we believe, right? That's all that shows you right there. That everybody generally kind of knows the presentation is quite the opposite of what we just saw. So it's like, yeah, that's strange. But they in this room are not really fighting each other. But nonetheless, I really hope that reaches the average person. Now, you could argue they still are, had their odds at different times, maybe even different times that they're angry with it. But at the end of the day, if they can have that chuckling conversation, if they can uncomfortably address the fact that they really do like each other, then there's something else going on. And that is the facade of politics.
I didn't realize it. I didn't realize it, how friendly it looked. I saw it on your wonderful network just a little while ago before I came in, and I said, boy, they look like two people that like each other, and we probably do. We have little different philosophies.
What does that mean, probably do? I just can't get past how ridiculous Trump can be when he thinks he's grifting, or I shouldn't grifting, riffing. Funny, either way. But he just said, well, we probably do. Ooh, what does that even mean? Do you or don't you? Like, it's a way to not answer it, but with kind of answering it. So if you really wanted to, you could secretly go, wink, wink. He doesn't really. He hates him. It's all 4D chess. That's what it's. That's my opinion. But I know this is how it gets. The whole trolling thing we keep talking about, where no one really knows. Are they just kind of trolling? Do they really know? Are they waiting for if they want to or not to call it a troll so they can get away from being guilty for what they were trying to do? Constantly.
He's right, but we probably do. I don't know. We just got along. But I got along with just about everybody on that. We met backstage.
Oh, right. So I just get along with everybody. Now that works. Now I'll say that one next, despite the weird answer I just gave. I'm friends with everybody. It all works.
Just, before we went on, And I thought it was a beautiful service, but we all got along very well, which is good.
Right. It's good, right? Anybody doesn't like unity, then you're a bad guy. Forget all of the narratives we've spun together for why they hate each other, for why he's my enemy, for why Obama's the main arch enemy asking Alex Jones for everything. But now we're together, so move on. It just doesn't even make sense. And that shows you that people who are invested in the direction, are willing to ignore immediate and obvious contradictions. That's the team sport politics. Also, why so many conservatives who aren't dishonest are just going, what the F? What's going on? And it makes them, and then usually a couple things happen or another narrative or another Jones show, something pulls them back. But one after another right now, it is continually cascading into the direction of question after question after question. And I think that's important to see. Now, even more interesting, and this is even from the New York Post, by the way, because well, that matters because they're very, very partisan and very pro-Israel and pro-Trump, and to the point where I've proven that they have outright, I would call it a lie, but willfully deceive people with the way that they frame these things. Nonetheless, here's what it says. Lip reader reveals Trump told Obama they will, quote, find a quiet place to discuss a matter of importance. Again, if you're objective, this could be a lie. This guy could be wrong. You always have to consider that. It says it's unclear what precisely the conversation would entail, but Obama and Trump appeared to be discussing international agreements, according to Freeman's translation. I just don't, if that's even remotely true, how do you put that together with what we're being told? And of course, the answer will just be like, well, he just wants his opinion. He's just going to get what he can from him. The typical read into it, whatever makes it make sense for you. But it says at one point, Trump leaned toward Obama and said, I've pulled out of that. It's the conditions. Can you imagine that? Obama laughed as Trump added, and after I will, before he pulled TV camera feed cut away from the men who were bracketed by former lady, the other people with him. It says, quote, call me at the foyer after. Yep. Trump replied to Obama during their exchange, possibly referring to the foyer in the other room. Obama then said, can you just, it should be good. Yeah, really, clearly a full bank of information, right? It just seems like a bunch of, like, for all we know, he's just guessing, which essentially that's what you're doing with lip reading. As much as you may be good at it, clearly you could misread it because you're guessing at what the lips are saying. It says, I can't talk. We have to find a quiet place sometime. That's what I find interesting. This is a matter of importance, and we need to do this outside so that we can deal with it. Certainly today, Trump said. Again, with a grain of salt, knowing it could be a lie or wrong, it seems quite interesting. It pretty clearly seems to suggest that there's more coordination, more amicable relationship than the way that the rest of the partisans would want you to see this. I'll make sure I read it all. Yeah, okay. Just a thought, had her a thought about it, and she says, two of the biggest and most successful psyops of our time. A Trojan horse for the liberals and a Trojan horse for the conservatives. People cut off their families for these men. They claim them as their king and the best ruler they've ever had. And they effing hate you. Exactly. I mean, guys, it's just, you got to even more so see the similarities. Not in exactly who they are, but the way that their traits tapped in to best deceive their side. It's very interesting. And there's so many examples like this. As I think it was just, was it Ike? I forget. Somebody basically saying the fake conservative and the fake liberal, both polling both parties. I'm hoping at least that you can consider that without dismissing it. Now, here is another, there's people are sharing this as if it's out of context, a clip going around Twitter. So I figure we'll just go right to the video that's been circulating with the full context. Same point. Now, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. I'm objective enough to say, hey, maybe these are all bad guys who have suddenly let's side with Trump and change the world for the better. Of course, that's possible. Is it likely that Bill Gates and everybody else that have been going to Mar-a-Lago, that they're all on the side of freedom and Trump? Is it on the same point? Is it not possible that Trump's not on that side? Like, it's incredible how many possibilities people will choose to ignore when they want to see a certain thing. You can call this the unity party, but the interesting part about it is in any other context, it would have been called something else, except it works for you right now because it's inconvenient to explain why all the people we just got done telling the world were the villains are now working with Trump. Like, you can't ignore it, but you know what? It's the same way they could ignore that Trump himself was involved, if not completely in charge of Operation Warp Speed, and still to this day tells you it's a positive thing. So Bill Gates, Donald Trump, both involved. But let's listen to what he has to say.
With these people in the States, you wouldn't have crime like that at all.
We've been watching over the last couple weeks, a lot of CEOs, including some who censored you 4 years ago, have been coming down here basically to kiss the ring.
That's what's his name, Dorsey or whatever, the Fox guy. I forget his name now. But basically to kiss the ring. Thanks for inserting your opinion over the top of your journalism. Great job. Not how you're supposed to ask questions as a journalist. But the point nonetheless is he has an objective, Fox News. The point is they're coming to pander to you because it's going to get a lot of views. That's the work. But is that what they're doing? I mean, have they done that in the past? Did they do it the last time? Not as far as I can tell. I mean, I think Gates was one he talked to, but Gates and Trump have much more of a relationship than the circle around Trump loves to be honest about. And let's not forget, he disregarded RFK Jr. last time because of Bill Gates. And now we go through the COVID illusion, and now we're here again. Nonetheless, to kiss the ring, well, you can consider that. Consider that it's them just trying to get good favor because he is going to be the president, right? But isn't it concerning that the people they're about to list off are just going to meet with Trump? And we don't know. We don't know if Bill Gates is going there to do that, or if they have an agreement, or if Trump and Bill Gates are going to work together. Just like he said in 2015 about working with Bill Gates to shut up the internet because ISIS. So many red flags.
Did they change or did you change?
Well, maybe we all changed. I think they've gained a lot of respect. I think they looked at the mandate that we got. As you know, we won the popular vote. As I said, we won all 7 swing states. They said, well, if Trump would win, I had to win 3 because I had a lot of early voting going on, and we had to win 3, and we won all 7, and we won them by a lot. We didn't win them by a little. We won them by a lot, and we won the popular vote by a lot. I think that had an effect. I also think it's like, let's get something done. You look at what happened with Facebook today and yesterday, what they announced. That was a big concession from them. I mean, they went from I call them the unlocked boxes. They call them lock boxes. I call them the unlocked boxes because they seem to be unlocked a lot of times. But you went from the unlocked boxes into a statement yesterday that's really talking about free speech. What a difference that is. And so we appreciate that. But I think they've gained a lot of respect. We've had everybody. Jeff Bezos came, Bill Gates came, Mark Zuckerberg came. Many of them came numerous times. The bankers have all come. Everybody's coming.
Oh, great. So the bankers, all the technocrats, all the Zionists. Yeah. If in any other world with any other person, every single person behind Trump will be screaming about why this was a problem. Just by virtue of the fact that they were present. If this was Kamala Harris, do we really pretend like they wouldn't be like, the fact that Gates and Zuckerberg and everyone went there proves that she's the bad guy? We know that. Now, I'm not talking about the honest conservatives that are, my point is always the team sport politics side, but that's all we get presented with in the corporate media and everywhere else, which shows you they're part of this game. But either way, that's concerning, is it not?
I haven't had anybody saying anything bad about me. I'm not used to it.
I haven't had anybody saying, I know it's low, by the way. This is just the video that Forbes put out. I don't have anybody saying anything bad about me. And doesn't that seem to contradict what we're being told? I've seen at least like 14 posts from Alex Jones since 2 weeks ago about how there's a secret plan bubbling up of the Democrats to stop his inauguration. Certainly wouldn't surprise me. I still point out that I've yet to see anything other than him saying that, because it gets reach, because people, like I keep talking about, the moment this all starts to implode, what do? They react. They shove you into the Democrat pedophiles and the UK gang over their immigration, the evil Islam. They lurch into the things they want you to react to, and many took the bait, despite some of these being important stories. I think it's very telling.
A lot of it's respect. I think they respect the Republican Party. The Republican Party has become a much bigger party. It's become a party for the worker. If you look at all of the union votes that I got, and when I say I, it's really all of us together because it's a whole thing. But we won the Teamsters. We did great with the auto workers. We did, all.
Say the point is just what he was simply mentioning. Bill Gates, Bezos, Zuckerberg. Here's just an article saying the same thing. Cozies up to Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Simple point, guys. You know exactly how they respond if this was anybody with a D by their name. And then we have the technocrat side of this, which is just shockingly obvious. I mean, all of them are. The technocrats, the Zionists, the Democrats, whatever you want. I mean, it seems like everybody that used to be considered a problem. Oh, now it's all good because we're the ones getting more power. Well, at least that's what Trump's team says. And then teams for politics, people go, that's what matters. And people trickle down. But Peter Thiel states he is still supporting Donald Trump and JD Vance. Now, this was from October 11th, 2024. The point is, to reiterate what he's saying here, every other way I can, he says, I'm helping the Trump administration. Expressing his support for Vance and Trump prior to the selection. Since the election, numerous Thiel and PayPal mafia associates have been handpicked for the Trump cabinet. As he says, the technocrats are in control.
Look, I have a lot of conflicted thoughts on it. I am still very strongly pro-Trump, pro-JD. I've decided not to donate any money politically, but I'm supporting them in every other way possible. Obviously, I think there's my pessimistic thought is that Trump is going to win and probably will win by a big margin. He'll do better than the last time, and it'll still be really disappointing.
So I think it's important to consider the fact that the funding I think was important because the idea there is to make it clear. I didn't fund him. That's my opinion. But funding, let's be clear, when you have that much billionaire backing, it's not the most important thing. I mean, it is in the context of how we understand politics. Money is a major factor, but I think we're in a different realm here, guys. And I think at the end of the day, everything else I can from Peter Thiel probably means a hell of a lot more. But the technocrats are clearly in control. As Derek wrote in October 2024, election 2024, Zionist technocrats versus Zionist technocrats. And even the picture does it for you right there. It doesn't matter which side you look at. You still have Zionists and technocrats who are going to win. And they did. James Corbett did a great breakdown of this called The Strange Story of Peter Thiel. Make sure you check it out. It's included in the show notes. There's what Whitney had to say in regard to Peter Thiel and a conversation her and Mark had, who I'm going to be interviewing Mark coming up in a couple of, I think a few days on the conversation of Bitcoin, because I had an interview with Mitch Burcham about the conversation that is a very important one as this all goes forward. And Mark has a slightly different opinion on the idea of where the origin point comes from, but similar opinions in a lot of other ways too. We're going to get into all of it because it's important to consider all perspectives. And I think at the end of the day, what they're working on this side of it is monumental. Like truly, like what Whitney and Mark have been uncovering around this is important. And so she highlights around the idea of Thiel and the overlap and what's kind of the same point, what's going on right now, this rebranding well before the recent Zuckerberg aspect of it, as we've been kind of pointing to. She says these Silicon Valley oligarchs trying to rebrand as libertarian, right? We've talked about that with Thiel. We've talked about that with, who was it? Zuckerberg was one of them, but there was somebody else just really the whole, I'll bring that up too, since we're going that direction. The whole, wait, I thought that was, what did I call that? Oh, I think it was this one, probably. Anyway, the Prosperity, this one here, the libertarian fake city, the fake libertarian city, a technocratic nightmare being framed as libertarian when it's not even remotely that. And we've gone over it in depth. Check it out if you want to go further. It's a horrifying reality. And this will relate later and the overlapping point I make later about, if we get there, about Greenland. And maybe that's exactly the whole point about the whole Freedom City push, which, by the way, they compare to Prospera. So they are building out, they're preparing for their technocratic kind of revolution around the world. And these are trial balloons. I genuinely think that. So the point she's making is, as they all try to rebrand as libertarian, they're trying to basically court the right to get them, the ones that would be the most resistant to what's coming, pacified, just like COVID-19. That's my opinion. She says these are what they're trying to rebrand as libertarian and based, making fun of that, even though they are fused at the hip with the U.S. national security state, especially Peter Thiel, and acting like they are all now outraged by Epstein, even though they all met with him, should be easy to see through. It should. However, unfortunately, plenty of, quote, independent influencers, including those who claim to care or have studied the Epstein network, important reference right there, are cheering on this transformation or treating it like it's an authentic thing and not an intelligence operation itself. Or you could argue more objectively, the point being that they're not even considering the possibility these people might not be on the path that Trump and them are laying out for you. I mean, which is just shocking when you can see, like, if the whole point is the people researching the Epstein network consider these people to be compromised or potentially, now suddenly they're the ones rolling out the new path. Shouldn't those be the people of all people that are skeptical? Some of them don't seem to be. Silicon Valley and the deep state, in quotes, are one and the same, excuse me, and should be a clear indication that the deep state itself is trying to cloak itself in a libertarian MAGA veneer to herd Americans who would normally dissent into supporting the same policy agendas that they have been weary about for years. This is what I've kind of like almost jokingly been highlighting, that every single thing is just now, well, it's the good guy version. Good guy AI, good guy digital biometric scans, the good guy robots, the great reset, good guy everything on the Elon side. It's all the good guy nanotech, the good guy mRNA shots. It's absurd. It is laughably absurd. And everybody can see that. That doesn't have a willful disregard for, I mean, that it becomes okay because that side does it. That's pretty wild. It says the deep state, in quotes, is rebranding itself, and many will cheer it on as winning. That's the unity party, right? Instead of recognizing how contradictory it is based on what they told you the world is, they go, oh, well, it works because now we're winning, right? We're powerful. We have more people. We're in control. We can censor who we like. It's the woke right and the woke left. It's the same difference. The difference is the letter next to their name or the angle in which they do. The point is, it's not even, I don't even think it's about the content they're manipulating at the end of the day. Like, it's used basically, but ultimately it's about ushering you into the step where that will no longer matter. But the whole as winning thing, I mean, that's the thing, whether it's the rebranding of the partisan elements or the very ideas of themselves, like basically the deep state themselves rebranding as the freedom heroes of the day. But it says, Mark Goodwin and I, Whitney speaking for herself, called out that this was happening over a year ago. We said that with trust in the public sector at an all-time low post-COVID, the effort to rebuild trust would move into the private sector as we are, after all, ultimately governed by a public-private partnership, from public to private and from left to right. It's ping pong to keep the public confused and ultimately docile. Stop focusing on rhetoric from politicians and oligarchs and focus on what they have done and what they do. Actions absolutely speak louder than words. And then she's quoting 12 Ball here, who you should follow, saying Peter Thiel just published an op-ed pretending that Trump will usher in a new era of transparency about the U.S. state crimes. You know, the crimes they were all involved in, because that makes sense, right? Pretends Trump didn't do it the first time because he was fooled by the myth that the deep state is right-wing. But boy, this time, though, things will be different. Well, guess what? It's also a myth that it is right-wing because it's all of your effing government. Now, I don't mean that in the sense that it's every person all aware that that's happening, but it's not a left-right dynamic in the context of what the real controlling structure is. That, in my opinion, is all an effort to keep you focused on yourselves and not recognizing the ones truly driving the bus. Whitney also says on the 10th, if the powers that be, or I would say that shouldn't be, or he's, as I think, was it Jason or John Bush, they wish they were, know that people have stopped trusting them, which is my point right now. I think we all are generally sensing to one degree or another. She goes, which has now been openly telegraphed, they will manufacture heroes and rebrand old ones while also retooling the sales pitches for their policies to fit the interest views of the demographic that has been creating the most resistance to those policies. And this doesn't happen all overnight, guys. It's a shift. Like, let's just say they try something and it doesn't fully work the way they want. Well, they'll pull it back and they'll retool it and eventually come at it from a different angle. And it's rarely just the same old thing. That's why I'm talking about the idea of like the COVID narrative. Like, I get the sense more is coming, but I just don't feel like it's going to be the same thing again. So I really want you to consider this point right here. You know, the idea that ultimately it's just going to come back at you. And what we're talking about is the way that this right now is sort of being rebranded. The technocracy is being rebranded as the freedom movement or whatever they're really trying to do right now, because that is how they get the people to execute what they're trying to accomplish, the people who would be the most resistant. I mean, look, during COVID-19, it was a really clear point as well, but I don't think it worked as well. But you had a lot of Republicans who were willing to side with Trump because he said it was a good thing. Same point. Now it says the op is in full swing. Don't be fooled. Remember, pay attention to the policy. That's what we keep talking about. What is the outcome? What is the action? Believe in him all you want. But if you jump ahead and start praising words, well, what if he just changes his mind? What if he's wrong? What if something happens that doesn't allow it to happen? Or what if he's lying to you? All of which are absolutely possible, many of which are not his fault. And you would still ultimately be wrong. So why we would ever in politics lean into the words floated, which I'll make a point about in a second, is propaganda, personal interest, desire. That's not the same as fact. Guys, it's very clear that these things are being, I mean, how long have we been talking about that? Back to that Newt Gingrich clip for so long ago where he goes, I'll lean into what the people think and you go with the facts. It's like, what did he just say? We saw it coming all the way back then. But he goes, she continues, pay attention to the policy and the promoted solutions, not to rhetoric. And it will be much easier to sift through. Really, when it comes to politics, just wait for what happens, right? Wait for what they do. Once they do something, like with the spending bill, for example, you can go through and go, whoa, wait a minute. That's not what we said. And then recognize Mike Johnson was playing a very clear role in that. And then Trump will pick him anyway. And then hopefully that wakes you up to the lie. But, coming back. Now, here is what Joe Rogan tweeted. Obviously, Mark Zuckerberg, for the however many time he's been on that platform, goes on there. And Joe says, the good old US of A is coming together. That would be nice, wouldn't it? I'm not going to disparage somebody's hope if you believe he really thinks that. But I don't know why or what because Zuckerberg said, seems like a pretty weird thing to lean into. I don't think Zuckerberg has any moral standing or clout around his honesty, but I guess that's working for that narrative right now. But it says Trump just wants America to win and Mark Zuckerberg's on board. That's all he says. I just think Trump wants to win. Okay. But that suddenly makes you think he's on your side. What happened to all the censorship? What happened to the people he literally were killed by action and inaction during the COVID-19 dynamic? What about the people he still censored? Doesn't matter. He said Trump good, and we all cheered. I just don't even understand how people are this easy to manipulate. Oh, here's an example of one that I'm speaking about. Libs of TikTok goes, holy schlit. Mark Zuckerberg says Biden had called his employees and screamed and cursed. And then take down the COVID vaccine content. They wanted Meta to censor memes too. Well, when he pushed back, the Biden regime started investigating his companies. It was brutal. Oh, so now you're taking Zuckerberg at face value without any due diligence? Cool. Imagine, so if Zuckerberg came out and was like, I have a signed affidavit that proves Donald Trump did something you don't like. Do you think they'd go, wow, holy schlit, look at what Zuckerberg said about Trump that changes the whole? Yeah, hardly. They would go, fake news. He's a Democrat. He's a liar. He's a technocrat. Yeah, that's how that works when it's not something they like. But when it's something that they can use, woohoo, he's now on our side, unity party. I just think this is embarrassing. No, as always, guys, I sure hope they're right. I mean, that would be great, wouldn't it? But are we really at the point where we want that to be, so we're going to pretend that's the case? And I'm the bad one for saying, but what about everything else? Kind of seems ridiculous, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know why conservatives continue to think people like this are on their side. I don't get it. Ryan Grimm comes in and says, the turn at the end here from Zuck is everything. Look at what he's doing. After building MAGA trust, he wants you to think Lena Khan came after Facebook over COVID posts. He's playing you. Guys, let's recognize the reality here that this was not a partisan dynamic. This was not only Facebook. And it wasn't just Biden's administration. It was literally happening during Trump's administration. But let's just selectively apply it the way we like. I mean, it's silly. And Ryan Grimm sees it. Ray from BitChute says, it's funny how people who not very long ago were censoring and deplatforming en masse are now advocating free speech. And it's as simple as that. You yell the right buzzwords, line up with the right person, and they'll flock. Or at least the dishonest people will. It says, especially now that a massive political shift is happening. How convenient. We should be cautious about judging people merely by what they say. Why do we have to keep reiterating that? This is not some like average people can't. This is a basic thing. Words do not, they're just words. clearly anything could happen. But I think there was a recent study we were talking about where it seems that that's one of the biggest political manipulations, which seems so basic, is that they've convinced people that words are what really matter, that they say a lot of good things and people go, that's my guy. That's the one I like. And then just fill in the blank afterward with why the Democrats or why the Republicans wouldn't let it happen or why this wouldn't, or it turned out not to be the right thing. It's not the point. It's the point is that they will lie about everything and people will obfuscate that reality. He says, we should be cautious. Obviously, we should judge them by their actions. BitChute has always maintained a clear commitment to absolute free speech, and we will never change that. Now, one thing I forgot to grab this. I want to point out, I recently found out that BitChute is now working with Laura Loomer as a whatever, I forget what she's doing with them. And I saw the post. I responded and I said, hey, just so you know, I aggressively disagree with what she is and how she produces her content, and she's a very dishonest, very, very deceptive person that is openly calling for Palestinians to be censored. So it doesn't really sound like something that jives with your message. But the point for me is that of all people, as much as I would clearly, my opinion, she has a right to free speech. No, I think that them working with her in any other regard than just making sure she has a voice was something that's probably going to hurt them. But you got to respect the fact that they want to give the free speech, guys, which includes the worst of speech, which is what we're highlighting. But I wanted to point that out because I'm sure that somebody out there will make that out to be somehow it's not. I support the platform that supports anybody who wants to speak. And I still do. And I respect the fact that they respected my thoughts on it. And they said, okay, well, appreciate that. And nonetheless, I just think that's important to highlight. And for those who don't know, by the way, BitChute is asked whatever they call it. They reached out to support TLAV, and the bottom line being that they want to grow their platform to be seen for what it actually is, and I'm happy to help. And the bottom line there is that I already believe in that platform. If you guys have always known, BitChute has been one of the platforms that is, I think, if not the only right now that I can tell, that is absolute free speech. Like that they, to their detriment. Anyway, the point nonetheless is that I thought that was worth pointing out. That if you believe in free speech, that's what has to happen. We have to go, wow, that person that is literally the worst. But, they have a right to speak whatever they want. They have a right to lie to you. That's actual free speech. Morgoth points out, the Joe Rogan podcast has become sort of an absolution booth where elites, I'd say elitists, undergo 3 hours of ritualistic bro talk before being born again as the common man or born again as libertarians. Like, that's a very interesting way to frame that. It kind of seems to be what keeps happening, right? Teal and, they run them through Joe Rogan. They come out the other side and we're like, we're libertarian based and we're going to change the world. It's like, wow, that would be great if it was real, but it doesn't seem to be. David Icke, in response to the same conversation, Benny Johnson, of course, says, maybe with some barnyard music in the background, so you're not sure if he's trolling or not, but it says, Mark Zuckerberg exposes the Biden administration, pressured Facebook to censor posts. Like, it's just so frustrating how they will lie, just jump at anything that is one-sided. Are we really pretending it was just the Biden administration? Come on, guys, we can't be this lazy, especially since right now, all through Trump's administration, and as we'll continue into the next one, they're censoring on Israel too. That's long before October 7th, remember, guys. That's not something that was unique. But it says they basically pushed us and said anything that says vaccines must have side effects. Yeah, you mean like exactly on the other side as well, or the one that Trump continues to support? They know this stuff, guys. But David says, this is such transparent rewriting of history, and Rogan is once again providing the platform. The tech oligarch gophers are being sold to the Trumpers by the usual suspects like Benny Johnson and the AI psychopaths as the AI psychopaths assemble under the Trump Musk Sachs banner for their final march to AI tyranny. He also goes on to say, with one of the other clips from Joe Rogan, the usual Rogan whitewashing to bring a cult asset on board with MAGA. Zuckerberg is the man who censorship of information, warning people about the Trump jab, has cost so many lives and destroyed so much health for people who would have made a different decision had they been in possession of the facts that Zuckerberg suppressed. Now it's all being blamed on Biden, and it's all carefully stage managed to clear the way for Zuckerberg to merge with the AI billionaire technocrats around Musk and Trump. Who, by the way, let's not forget the metaverse aspect of this. Anyone who falls for this deserves to be scammed, and they will be, as he says. Whitney, in response to the same thing, says the people who will use this podcast to tell you Zuckerberg has changed and now is ultra-based, will also be selling you Meta's metaverse. Just give it a year or two. Zuckerberg isn't and will never be your friend, and Facebook Meta was always an operation of the national security state. And don't forget, Whitney and I had this conversation a while ago, well ahead of the curve in October 2021. Facebook and the metaverse with Ryan Cristian. And we get into this about exactly this conversation. One, about how it was woefully underperforming and not prepared properly, but maybe that was the point. And now they're going to work together and roll it into it. Let's not forget the aspect of the XAI point. Let's see if I can get that to pop up, actually. This one, maybe that one. Let's see. Yep, boom, right there. So if you don't remember this conversation, I'll give you this to check it out. Elon Musk is currently running his XAI program, which DARPA ended their XAI program in 2021, the end of 2021. In the early part of 2022, Elon buys Twitter, turns it into X, starts XAI. Totally separate things, we're told, even though they're exactly the same program. And every other way, you can see him as a face of basically rolling out DARPA technology as a private entity. I don't think that's what's happening. Palantir being immersed with this, this is the direction we're going in. But that's important to understand, because the reality is they've been working on this a lot. And one of the things they're discussing using his XAI program is optimizing health outcomes through XAI and digital twins in media interventions. You know where they're working on digital twins? In the metaverse. This is all going to be coming together, and it's not even a secret. I just hope people can pay attention enough to recognize what's coming, enough to push back. I'll include both these for you. So, problem is that it seems very transparent what's coming. Very few seem to want to push back on it within the partisan conversation. And there's a reason for that, I think. And I think, again, it's important that it's hard. I don't know how to say this in a way that I don't have to always repeat that at the end. And, by the way, I don't mean all of them. I'm trying to think of a way to package that better. But just remember that I'm not talking about all conservatives. I really think that's important. Just like I was on COVID, I'm very convinced right now that I would just say a majority of partisans are concerned about what's happening. I would even say that slants more to the right, that are more concerned. But anyway, Andrea Lynn, who has been on a very good, she's been tearing this down in a good way. Like I think, was more leaning towards the right and has woken up to this, which is important, I think, to continue to highlight and praise people for the integrity it takes, the courage it takes to do that with the way this goes, having your entire, everybody in the conservative side that is blind to it or don't want to hear it attack you for proving that they're wrong, right? It's everywhere right now. And she simply says, continuing this effort to highlight this for people that need to see it, mind control over the masses has never been stronger than it is today. Years of mockingbird media propaganda, GMOs, pharmaceuticals, and vaccines have created a docile, brainwashed society. Grown adults now idealize cabal-owned billionaires, loyal servants of a corrupt system, even at the cost of destroying their own families and friendships. What sane person places their faith in the very elitists who profit from their oppression? The world has become one giant insane asylum. Until this spell is broken, the cycle of tyranny will only grow stronger. Now, I get why she's saying that. And just like last time, she was saying something like conservatives are lost, and somebody was like, well, I'm not. And she was like, well, correction, I mean the fake conservatives, or what I would call the team sport politics, right? So same kind of point here, I would argue. If you really were sitting in the room with her and asked her, I bet you she would make that point, which is ultimately that, at least I'm just going to speak for myself, I don't believe it's the majority. I do believe this is happening, but I believe it's in a circle that we pretend is the majority, and that's the team sport politics of it all. But that is what's happening. Like mind control, aggressive kind of stuff that we're talking about. But I'm on the good side of it, seeing more people wake up to this. But just the partisan angle of all this is hilarious to me. And this is the kind of team sport politics entity I'm talking about. Now, I want to show you something about this. The overall point here is how quick this can change, right? So the ultimate point is that people can rapidly go back and forth. So we have this example of Zuckerberg suddenly being, now he's a good guy because it works. And that's what the narrative is today, right? Well, it just needs to show you how hypocritical, what a double standard it is, or just the lack of agency or constitution. He says on October 19, 2020, remember this conversation, it was everywhere. We need Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court yesterday, right? It says Schumer says shutting down the Senate after, can he do that? No. And they're all fighting to get this person in, right? Later, months later, reminder, Amy Barrett is going to be confirmed. Weeks of Democrats crying, crocodile tears won't change nothing. Jump forward to today, January 9th anyway. Traitor, Mitch McConnell, globalist, plant, fraud, snake, backstabber, phony, sellout, leftist, puppet, weasel, fake, plastic loser. Wow. Interesting how fast that can change. Ian Smith says, this is literally a Trump pick, you effing muppet. So there's deviation even within the high-level conservative side, but it's just interesting how rapidly things can change based on what works or what doesn't, or what your partisan agenda is that day. Like Kyle Rittenhouse calling out a very provable point, having this person scream that you're now boxed out of the community because that's inconvenient for Trump. That's just straight up dishonesty, guys. Now, in the same idea, we have RFK Jr., who is somebody who I argue, despite all the very, very obvious concerns I have around his blind support for Israel, which to me undermines just about everything else he's ever done, but doesn't remove it, he has done amazing work around the health field his entire career. Which, by the way, is why I think they were never really going to let him in this position, because the government, not the fake left-right divide, but just the controlling government entity, which Trump is a part, whether he knows he's working for that or not. My point is that they're all one thing, don't want this person there. That's my read on it, because he brings more uncomfortable awareness than he doesn't. However compromised he may be by Israel or whatever you think is happening there. So that's why I've always, remember, day one, I told you, the Senate not confirming him was one of the most logical parts of this, which then they could forever blame the Democrats. That's how that tends to work. But CBS says over 17,000 doctors, which, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now that doctors who are signing this about him are probably the COVID level doctors who are going to lie exactly the way the State Department and the CDC tell them to. But it says they're calling on the Senate to reject Trump's pick to lead HHS, RFK Jr. You know why it's ridiculous? Because of all the things he could lead the HHS, he's right about everything he says around the health field. And that's just the easily verifiable fact. The people that are signing these letters to not let him in are the ones that still pretend fluoride fixes your teeth, or that it's not hurtful despite the provable documented studies or the court case from the U.S. government itself or the NTP report. Fake news, right? Or that geoengineering is a fake story, or whatever else we're talking about. That will ignore the obvious realities of the endocrine-disrupting chemicals that are in our water, because that's not supposed to be what we talk about. But nonetheless, guys, I'm still very suspicious and cautious about what everything else is showing us. But I just want to point this out, that it's interesting how we already see this deviation. This little quick segment is going to be about some partisan points around the people here. Shannon Joy, I wanted to reiterate this. Ever since Milk Bar TV did a really great breakdown of this, of Andrew Tate. So really, obviously this is the last part before we get into the wildfires, but this whole opening segment is about partisanship, right? So this last little part of it is just about the individuals in some cases. A few of the ones I want to point out. And so a lot of them, like we'll point something about Tim Pool in a second, just because it's funny, but Andrew Tate is one of these people that has been playing a major outsized role. I mean, he went up like crazy, the amount of followers he has now. And the point is that this is an objectively horrifying person. Not because of anything other than literally what you can listen to him brag about and what he is and what he's done his entire life. And then Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens let him come on and just lie with zero pushback. And that's not even that is provable. I mean, like one of the most provable things in the conversation today. You have to ask yourself why that is. Nonetheless, he still is a huge figure in all of this, literally training children in this world how to be the worst person, the worst version of themselves, but, make money. And like the idea is that is the whole might makes right direction of the current administration. It's not about being a good person or having morals and integrity and following through on what you promise. It's about taking what's yours because I'm powerful, because that's what real men do. That's the kind of dumb stuff you get from idiots like this. Now, the point is Shannon Joy is calling it out. She's like, challenge. And look, if you don't agree with that and you have the wherewithal to watch these things, look at what he says himself. If you still deny it, then you don't care. It says, I challenge Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, Russell Brand, and Jordan Peterson, and Candace Owens, by the way, to review these horrifying videos of Andrew Tate in his own words and deeds. Then ask yourself if your spirit can allow you to continue to platform him and launder his dark character to your audiences. Now, sadly, and maybe she's probably just trying to make a point here, but I don't believe they care about either their spirit, doesn't even matter, or they already know what they're doing. And I'm not of the illusion that any of them are unaware of these videos. Do you realize they have million followers? Somebody sent these things to them. They know about it. It's out there. It's everywhere you look, underneath things they're posting. They know, they don't care. That's my opinion, but I think that's quite obvious. But as she goes on to say, I am being sincere. The promotion of Tate on conservative platforms like Twitter must end. Now, I'm not going to play these. You want to watch them for yourselves, go ahead. I've already gone over this. It is horrifying. Like the worst womanizing, rape level, sexual trafficking kind of nonsense, and laughing about it. Beating women. I mean, I go on. Like the things that would make you, this is the worst of human nature in the context of domineering over somebody. Like that leads to the darkest parts of this. Which, by the way, the whole lawsuit with human trafficking, it's not gone, despite the lies about that. These people are sex traffickers, guys. That's the reality here. Either way, I'll let you dive into it for yourselves. Shannon says, people can't understand why Andrew Tate is so popular on social media. The truth is he's not. Interesting take. He's a vile, low-life degenerate, she says, but he has very rich and powerful backers like Elon Musk, Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson. There's a reason for that. Who skew the algorithms to promote his accounts and or platform on his shows. Like when he came out, I think pretended to be censored on Twitter, which got a lot of, they want to frame themselves as the outsider, rebel, being persecuted. It works for them. It goes on to say, they grant him, bestow to him millions in unearned advertising. They don't have to do this, but for some insane reason, they do. And their biggest question she has is why? Regardless of the reason, we need to make them stop, and we can do this by raising our voices. Now, I appreciate she believes that just calling them out. I mean, I'd like to believe that. Good. I'm glad Shannon's doing a good work. And I think that doing this, if it changes that, great. I just have a lower opinion of what they might respond to, of who they are, rather. And I don't think they're going to care, but we'll have to wait and see. Other partisan point, like my point is, these are people that are huge in this movement that need to show you what the team sport politics side is all about. Not all conservatives, not even remotely. Tim Pool, I just thought it was funny, by the way. Same thing, huge conservative influencer comes out and says, there is no bigger spreader of misinformation than the U.S. government. I'm like, wow, hot take from 1990. He's changing the world over there. I just simply said, brave take, Tim. Blowing us out of the water with these huge bombshells. I mean, this is just click farming, engagement farming. Like, that's just dumb. Yes, bud. I think we all know that. Or people that just flatly disagree. Either way, that statement is meant to do nothing other than just go, look at, I know things and whatever you want to think about it. It's embarrassing. I laughed. I see people like, don't praise him. I'm like, guys, did I really need to add the apostrophe or the /s, like a sarcasm? This is meant to be sarcasm. And I jokingly said the internet really did kill sarcasm, #S. But I thought that was funny. But other points about Tulsi Gabbard you may want to know, and we'll talk about more about this. On the occasional day, we decide to go further into the social commentary of it all. But Tulsi Gabbard changes to an uncontroversial intelligence tool following GOP lobbying. So it's important to hear the 702 Pfizer conversation, right? The idea that, am I confused about this, or is every conservative in the conversation fully aware that this is a horrible thing that is being used to spy on you, being used like the most irresponsible way you could possibly imagine, going back as far as you want to look, on both sides, by the way, but definitely both sides. That means left and right. And now you have Gabbard deciding to endorse and continue. They want them to be used. Of all people, Tulsi Gabbard, really? Every day I see more examples to feel like she is not who she ever pretended to be. The GOP lobbying for it. Why would the GOP lobby for that if they were on the side of what we're being told? Now, of course, a lot of the Trump team in the team sport politics circle or conservative circles see the rest of the GOP as sort of like, which I'm glad they're at least gotten there, not on their side, Rhino or whatever. The point is they're all just the same thing. It's not Rhino, not fake Republican. They're just all the government. But go all the way and realize that they're all like that. And realize that what this shows you is that the GOP lobbying for it shows you that that's the agenda. We need these things. I just think that's super important. She voted against this, the reauthorization, but guess what? Every single administration, left or right, always continues to reauthorize it, just like they do with everything else that matters for them that you may not even know they're working on. So ask yourself, when there's these big Pfizer reauthorization, for example, or every time they continue to reauthorize things like the Patriot Act, why don't we have some big story about that? Why isn't there some big partisan debate? Why isn't there some big bombastic story? Because they don't even want you thinking about it. Instead, they manufacture some huge debate about things we can't even prove, and the entire partisan field carries it away for the next week. And meanwhile, 75 important things happen in the background over and over and over. Now, Jack Posobiec says, notice who is talking the most loudly about ending the forever wars. Someone like Gabbard, for example, was one of them, but she clearly is not that, as she endorsed wars more than once. He goes, GWOT veterans like Pete Hegseth, J.D. Vance, Tulsi Gabbard. Oh, really? I mean, it's almost like you have to laugh at this. Talking the most loudly? Is that supposed to be what we ever praise? Like he's literally trying to train you to react to the words. I simply said talking the most loudly, as usual. If they actually do that, monumental if, I'll heap praise on them. Until then, you're just promoting self-serving political narratives, which, of course, probably got no engagement. Shocking. Look at that. Come on, guys. Like Pete Hegseth is a ridiculous. Everyone she just lists off right there. I mean, Gabbard is a little bit less than the other two, but still clearly seems to be a Zionist, are all blindly supportive of a foreign country over your American interests. And on top of that, they seem to be yelling the loudest about things that I can promise you they will not do. Typical. Just like the Democrats before it. They say the things you want. Locker, or in this case, this would be like, I actually forget what Biden and the rest of them promised. My point nonetheless is that always selling you on something they will never actually follow through with. I think we were so much more focused on the fact that Biden was just a senile, weekend at Bernie's type. But Trump, for example, lock her up, JFK, and the Fed, they're doing the same version of that now with a little bit of a more technocratic slant. But guess what, though, guys? They're talking the loudest about it. Let's all cheer. These people are not on your side. Lastly, on this segment, Trump is planning 100 executive orders starting day one on border deportations, other priorities. So you're not even going to give it a shot with every house controlled? Anybody want to explain that for me? So you have every aspect. You have complete. Now, that doesn't mean that they can do whatever they want. There's still Democrats that exist. They have the majority in every single position. Okay, so why would they start with executive orders? Wouldn't they at least go through Congress to see if they could get it done? Because, guys, it's not about, this is the illusion of a process. We don't have that world anymore. These are a bunch of enriching themselves, technocrat, elitist Zionists, all packing into Congress, doing what they can to benefit and enrich themselves while they sign a piece of paper. Trump goes, that's the thing, sign it, go, done. Where's the influence? Where's the check and balance? I don't think that ever even existed, really. I mean, they're so lazy how obvious this is right now. And remember what he said about Obama before he came in last time. Obama with executive orders, he did the exact same thing more than ever. Now he's going to probably break that record yet again. You could argue it's because of whatever narrative, they'll never let it, or because we have to undo what the Democrats did. I've heard all of the same old talking points. If you want to pretend he's any different, maybe you should actually start off, I don't know, differently and do it the way you say they should have done it. But nah, we'll do it the same way because they started it. That's real mature. That's what I mean, come on, guys. It's the same thing everywhere else. This is not what you would do if you were trying to strike a better path. This is what you would do if you want to cement what you want during your administration the same way everybody else did, but extra, like more than ever. 100 executive orders starting day one. How much you want to bet that a lot happens there that we don't even recognize? And on top of that, executive orders only apply to the executive branch. And yet today we are living in the rule by executive order for the country. Why doesn't that concern Republicans? It should. You know, the ones that care about constitutional rights and freedom and liberty. But Trump does it. It's okay. Biden did it. Of course, they would all have a problem. And the reality being the new Trump administration and the technocratic Zionist coup of the United States. That show was November 30th, 2024. And guys, I'll tell you, this has been ongoing. I've never seen it like this. It's happening this time. That's how I feel. But you guys can decide for yourself, and I hope I'm wrong. Now let's talk about these fires. Now, first, I want to start with something, just an overall. I mean, again, I guess I kind of already, if you didn't tune in to start, I basically just kind of laid out some information about the way I think this is important to view. And really, to quickly say, I just think it's important that we go about this in what we can prove, as always, not based on a hunch, not based on what works for a partisan narrative, not based on what somebody I trust said or what a video on Twitter was showing, because, those are all data points, pieces of evidence, but proof is what we're looking for. something that is definitively the case. Other than that, we used to pretend like you didn't go further than that. We say, here's what we can see so far. We don't know for sure. Today, it's nothing but evidence being presented as proof, because that's what is in the interest of what either their reality TV vision is, the trolling they're doing, because it's entertaining to go down the rabbit hole, or because it's all about partisan manipulation. All of those are existing. And it's just constant right now. And so right now, I think it's important that we highlight the things that could be in regard to the reality of how these things could be the way that they're presenting them, and highlight the things that are very clear in the malfeasance side of this, but just leave it at a point where we wait for more evidence. Now, again, if you know something is happening right now, if you see something that is, for example, more evidence than people randomly starting fires, which matters, but anything other than malfeasance, not doing the thing that would have been needed to make this less problematic. Yes, that's very important. That amounts to malfeasance, enriching themselves, profiteering, and maybe with more evidence around it would end up proving that it was a design to do this for the Great Reset, let's say. But if you don't have that last part, and all you have is the fire hydrants, the water, the aspect, all the different things we've talked about, I agree, those are monumentally important for just discussing government malfeasance of the government, not just the Democrats or just Gavin Newsom, which is a lazy effort to make it about one thing when you can make the same arguments in every state in this country, which we'll go over at least in California, but kills me that happens, right? The point is that I think right now that's where we are. I'd love to hear more information. If you guys in the chat think that something else, if you've got more evidence that leads to proof of actual coordinated plans to do so, show it to me. Aside from that, I think it's important to consider the information, but then wait for the proof. Or acknowledge that it might not be the bigger story they're highlighting. It might just be Gavin Newsom being a criminal and enriching himself during a disaster, which happens every time, or doing so beforehand in order to enrich himself at his benefit and then allowed it to be worse. Those are all possible. Now, the idea of the Great Reset, for example, or the idea of the supply chains, the burning of land, obviously, if you watch this show, we've talked about the reality of these long-term agendas for a very long time, which weirdly overlap with the NWO, the New World Order, that they seem to want to ignore right now, as they're literally rolling out the North American Union to begin this direction, and they lurch into something else to make about that, which, by the way, could be, but ask yourself why, with one of the most obvious examples we've seen in a very long time of exactly the Great Reset, NWO, globalist, all of it, that they go a different direction and point at something that I think you can't prove that may be the case. Doesn't that seem very, very obvious? Now, actually, I'll grab this. We're going to get into, I'll point this out later in the show. But ultimately, what we just discussed in the last show, and this is specifically about this, what people can call conspiracy theory, but I don't think is the case. And this is the show. As Israel's globalist ambitions become clear, Team Sport Republicans endorse North American Union. Or don't call it that, of course. Act like it's not what's happening. But it's people like Alex Jones that have been calling this out for their entire career, or at least engaging with this as a reality. The moment it finally comes to fruition, it seems they're nowhere to be seen. I find that to be very, very telling. So, starting on this point, I just want you to see the damage we're looking at here. Okay, so check this out. So what we're seeing, the devastation caused by these fires almost looks like bombs went off. It's crazy. Almost as if the entire thing was ethnically cleansed or something. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. That's actually just a live broadcast genocide in Gaza that most are in power are currently ignoring. So go ahead and ignore it too. Carry on. I think that's important just to highlight. Not to say one is, that you shouldn't care about the fires. People are suffering. It's traumatic. But just interesting that objectively what's going on in the world right now, that this becomes the all-encompassing story across basically the Western news sphere. Why is that? My point is always, is malfeasance is important, but are we pretending right now, okay, the story that is being overtaken right now is the narrative being built without the proof that this is some great reset, that Jones seems to be the one driving aggressively that agenda, which very much could be the case, right? And then using that. So if the story is the malfeasance around all of this, and the maybe story of that, you can't prove, so we stay with the malfeasance, Are we pretending that the malfeasance that led to 11 people dying so far and a lot of rich people losing their homes, which is very sad, as well as other people, is objectively a bigger story than even more other things happening in this country? That's not to in any way downplay or diminish what's going on there. It's a sad story that deserves to be discussed in its right as trauma, or as a, what's the better word for it? Destruction. Possibly with more to it. But I just think it's very telling that people, that right now with all that's going on in the world, or even just this country, this story becomes all encompassing because it has emotional play to it, right? Look they lost everything in their homes, and that's terrifying. Lost their pets. You want to get to me? That's how you do it. Breaks my heart that people had to leave their, a whole thing. But you can still stand back and not be emotional and recognize that the story we're talking about today is smaller by all rights than just about than most of the other stories we're talking about in a long sense. I think that's important, which right there alone is going to get me angry letters, but guess what? I get that every day anyway. Despite how many times I can say that it's not meant in any way to diminish the reality of their suffering. It's like saying this huge fire that killed these people, right, is less of a story or less damaging than than the shots that killed 1 million people. I mean, that's just objective, right? You can easily see that. One is not less or more. It's just that this is a bigger story that killed more people. So objectively, that's the case. All I want to ask is why this seems to be, you know where I'm going. It's because this has been leaned into by a partisan field in a very bombastic way. So here's the actual footage, which is crazy. Press News, the drone footage. One of the minis, you'll find it. What's interesting about this is now you're going to see the overlaps with the direct energy weapon point, and it's without any evidence to back it up, as far as I can tell, just by look, a blue dumpster. That's Stu Peters for you. Which in that even that point itself is already. I'll go over it when I get to it in a second. But it's interesting. Let's be clear: direct energy weapons are real. It's not even up for debate. But look at a fire you've seen over your life, well before this was even possible, or well before it was even in the conversation. You'll recognize very similar patterns. Fires are irregular. Things happen based on the wind, based on moisture, based on any number of things. Now, that's not to say that we should dismiss the possibility, or rather, first of all, dismiss the fact that it is happening. It has happened, let's say, or they are capable of. And we'll get into that in a minute. Weaponized elements of this. Lahaina, I think, are very clear examples of a lot of that. But if we can't prove it, then we can't just immediately jump into it because it is entertaining. Right now, my point is that you can see fires in the past that have these weird anomalies. That's just how these things tend to work. Now, also, this is just an article from Wildfire Today saying historic Los Angeles wildfires are anything but unprecedented. Again, that's not to diminish the importance of what's going on or the suffering, but it is objectively something that has happened pretty much the similar way before, maybe the most destructive. But there's kind of right now they're saying that it may well turn out to be the most destructive in history. But ultimately it says, whatever the cause, a combination of hurricane force winds, drought, and an abundance of newly grown vegetation that had quickly dried created the perfect storm for rapid and destructive wildfire spread. Right? That's whatever caused it, those things were just there present. That's just objectively there. So that obviously caused this to be even more bad, which we're going to get into, I think, the malfeasance part of it first, to show you how just egregious this is. Why any of this was that way at all, or why they're still in somehow this miraculous level of a drought, or I want to go into it right now, but you can see all the blue tabs right there. I've gone over this before. If you guys have been watching this show a long time, you already know this. In particular with California, we discussed it with Paradise and the campfires. I don't even understand how this is not the most obvious part of the story, but we'll get to it in a second. It's about how much money they've received from both Trump and Biden administrations in California for water infrastructure. But it says the Palisade fire and at least the 4 other fires that ignited on the same day were often called unprecedented by officials in the media, but they were anything but. These fires may well be the most destructive for LA, but are only considered unprecedented by those who have forgotten the past history of the fires in the area. Now, this is simply to point out that the partisan embellishing on these things is very prominent right now, or rather you leading into it as something more. I think that's important. Now, here is the general let's update this in case it's changed. California wildfires, Los Angeles death toll rises to 11 as governor orders water investigation, which hardly believe that he cares about this because I think he's the obvious culprit when it comes to the malfeasance around the money. But 11 died. That's sad, especially with the families and the pets and all that they've lost. I mean, truly to understand what it would mean to lose everything in your life, every photo, right? Every heirloom. That's crazy and is worth your consideration at the very least. Carrie says this in regard to the assumptive partisan element. She says, I know a lot of people know, I love those starts. I know a lot of people know exactly what caused the fires in LA, but I'm wondering how many people who are spouting off about it with such certainty are aware, for example, how many fires have been started due to monopolized power companies' poor practices and or failure to maintain equipment and infrastructure. In fact, one of the fires burning right now, the Hearst fire, is following the footprint of one likely such fire, the Saddle Ridge fire in 2019, which was suspected to have been related to Southern California Edison. Saddle Ridge started under an Edison transmission tower. There are numerous incidents where these power companies were conclusively found to be responsible for fires. The Kincaid fire was found to have been caused by PG&E. The Camp Fire, also caused by PG&E, killed over 80 people, and the company even pled guilty to manslaughter. Gavin Newsom, who received campaign funding from the company, then hired a law firm to write a new law to protect them. She goes, this isn't me claiming power lines caused the current fires or that no one had considered this. It's saying there are so many possible causes, many which likely collided in a perfect storm, and the government here is culpable on many fronts. I'm open to anything, however, out there, but I prefer to consider it based on actual evidence, not just because somebody somewhere online thinks it's obvious or has a feeling. Now, again, she's an excellent researcher, guys. She's done her due diligence, same as I have. I don't see anything that I can call definitive evidence of what the Joneses of the world are pushing as absolute fact. Just my opinion. Conclude it for yourself. Definitely there's data points that just like we've always seen, because like she's saying, our governments are corrupt. They're constantly doing this. But instead of addressing the immediacy of the crime, you jump into something much larger that becomes basically impossible to prove, especially if it's not even accurate. Then what happens? Does Gavin Newsom go to prison? Definitely not when you're not even pointing at the crime. Think about that if you want to at least consider that the Jones and whoever else are not really doing what you think they're doing. Carrie, by the way, is somebody who is doing what you might think she's doing because she's very transparent and honest about her work. But just what she was highlighting, PG&E pleads guilty to 84 counts of manslaughter and Camp Fire. This was in the Camp Fire case. This is from the 2020. This is former PG&E executives agreed a $117 million settlement over the California wildfires back in the same time frame. Here's the California PG&E pays $55 million settlement over the Kincaid and Dixie wildfires. It's happened more than once. This one says Newsom's office craft. That's what she was referencing, which, by the way, this is what I'm kind of highlighting. This instead of, even back then, instead of actually holding these people accountable, there was all these different theories flying around, which are valid. And it's always a good thing to consider those theories. But when they start to overtake what we can prove as what I think partisan, that's like their main role today, you deviate from what we can do. In this case, Newsom never got in trouble. He literally crafted a law protecting PG&E because they donated to his campaign that stopped them from being held accountable. That's government for you. It's not unique to Democrats, guys. Now, this is what really blows me away. Now, what we're going to do right now, I'm just going to show you, starting in 2010, I forgot to, I want to add this up, actually. I'll do it on my screen. How much money that was spent or sent to California for specifically, and I'm willing to bet you there are other ways you could phrase this, not just for water infrastructure, but like for water treatment and I'm willing to bet you it gets way bigger. But this is just what I could find searching for that one phrase by the year. This will blow your mind. It's more than I saw back in the last time. And we're going to go, but starting 2010, I'm sure it goes well before that, most likely. Hundreds of millions of dollars, multiple times a year for water infrastructure, for water development, for all these different elements of it. And yet every single year they struggle with water issues, or every single year. And it's not just that's how big the problem is. You go through this in depth like we did the last time around the Camp Paradise dynamic. It's undeniably proven, guys. You can see the money is not going to what they claim it is. There are people in California that are screaming about this. But we're focused on more lofty things that we can't prove. So nothing ever really changes. That's the partisan game for you. But here it is. EPA announces nearly it comes from the EPA, $300 million in federal funding for California infrastructure improvements. Now that's a broad sense, but it does say water and wastewater infrastructure right there. 2010. This is from 2016. So what's important to highlight, not that this necessarily matters for the point I'm making, but for those that want everything to be only bad guy Democrat or only Republican, the point is for me to show you that it's just your government, all sides of it. 2016, before Trump's in office, EPA announces more than $182 million for drinking water and wastewater infrastructure in California. 2017, now Trump's in office. EPA to announce millions to improve local water infrastructure, reduce pollution statewide. And that is right here, $14 million. 2017, EPA announces $95 million for wastewater projects in California. Now, this is wastewater, but it has to do with the same dynamic, water infrastructure. Here, EPA awards $173.5 million for California drinking water and wastewater projects. 2018. I mean, my God, where is this all going? Is this money laundering? Is this going for something else? Black budget projects? Is Gavin Newsom putting in his pocket? You tell me. 2020. Still Trump's administration, $196 million water infrastructure loan to California. 2020 again, still Trump's administration, $108 million loan. Wait, is that the same? No, that's different. $196 million, May 2020. Now we're in October 2020. Now they're at $108 million. Well, what the hell are we talking about? You just gave them almost $200 million and you just give them another $800 million more? Okay, now we're still in Trump's administration, $85 million loan to San Mateo, California, improve waterway. So you're giving money to the government of California and then also giving hundreds of millions to the individual location. I mean, how does that even make sense? EPA announces nearly $500 million for the same thing in 2020. So we're still in Trump's administration and I forgot to add it up. Look at this, guys. Now, again, I'm only saying that for the sake of so you understand that it's both sides of it. I mean, but you could simply argue that Trump doesn't even know about this, which, again, you could make the same argument about Biden, but of course, that's not how that works. The point is you should consider they're in power, which means it's their administration. That's how you frame it. So both Trump and Biden's administration have continued to dump billions of dollars into California water infrastructure. But I just don't understand where is this going? First of all, if you add this up, I'll go back and do it. We're talking billions of dollars. Is that what they need over the process of a decade for water infrastructure? I don't think that even remotely adds up. But on top of that, you can give this much money. You're in December 2020. Now you're in I had those backwards. You're in November 2020, $500 million. And now you're in December 2020 and another $85 million. Like, how does that even line up for anybody? Here's 2021. So now we're in Biden's administration. Over $600 million. You're less than, what is that? That's like 4 months later. And you give them another $600 million for water infrastructure. I just think there's a crime happening here. I don't know how we disregard that. Here's 2022. EPA awards California another $609 million in funding for water. This is specifically for water quality. EPA announces 67. Now, to be clear, the water infrastructure is largely what has to do with what we're discussing today. But overall, I'm going to make a point about drinking water too. The amount of money flowing into these hands is shocking. Now, and then you ask yourself why we're at $40 trillion of debt. $67 million in funding. I think this is all profiteering. I think this is all enriching themselves on your tax dollars. $67 million in funding for, I'm sorry. I forgot to delete this one. I was opening a bunch of them and some of them don't apply to California. As you can see, that's Washington. I just forgot to close it. Biden-Harris, 2023, $166 million for California clean water infrastructure. How many times can they upgrade their infrastructure within the process of a month or 2 months or 6 months? 2023 still. Biden-Harris administration announces another over $391 million for drinking water infrastructure. 2023, April 6th, Thursday, top of the scroll. Biden gives California more than $690 million to improve, hey, guess what? Water quality, infrastructure. Biden-Harris administration, 2024, gives over $500 million for, can you guess? Drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, infrastructure upgrades. Biden-Harris administration, 2024 again, October, gives $269 million to California for clean water. Lastly, Biden-Harris administration announces in October 23rd, latter half of October, another $276 million for water infrastructure. I mean, guys, that's shocking. And I guarantee you this is a fraction. Then ask yourself how much more is going to other states. I'm actually willing to bet you that it's not as much. I think California is a unique money pit, but my God. So just recognize the amount of money flowing into this country. There should be no moment at which you have an issue with water. I mean, that's just crazy. I just can't get past that. So on the drinking aspect of it, I just want to highlight this. It's a small deviation, but Biden administration in February 2024, last year, announces $5.8 billion to clean up drinking water, which, by the way, is not happening. I mean, these are articles admittedly from before 2024, but guys, I don't see anything changing in the reports. What we see, Derek has been written about this for a long time. As far as I can tell, the drinking water, the infrastructure itself is just as bad as it's been for a long time. So where did this money go? That's just my opinion, though. Look into it for yourself. Here's 2018, excuse me. Are you one of the 170 million Americans drinking radioactive tap water? Now realize these are not random things. These are all rooted from scientific studies, from reports from the government. Here's Derek's report, activist post. Nearly all U.S. drinking water contaminated with cancer-causing chemicals. That's PFAS, that's dioxin, that's glyphosate. That's literally everything we've talked about, and we've known about it for a very long time. This is Derek's. Oh, this is Whitney. I'm sorry. I guess he's the latter two. This is from Whitney, 2017. War, corporate profiteering, among factors pushing over $2 billion to lack safe drinking water. This is from Derek, 2017. Why is the media ignoring America's drinking water crisis? And you read this, guys, it goes from everything from lead to, it's everything we've talked about. Derek's been on this for a very long time. This one is from Collective Evolution from 2017. Study finds more than 24,000 chemicals in your bottled water. Which ones are harming you? Well, the reality is all of them. In plastic anyway, which is most of them. Because that's where it's coming from. It's everywhere you look. Now let's talk about the malfeasance side of this because of what we just highlighted, right? And these are just a few of the examples. You'll find this everywhere you look. The reason I don't even think this needs to be explained. The reality that your governments, I think the main point for me is that it's not just unique to Gavin Newsom, Democrats, or California. And if you're unaware of that, I think that's where you need to start in all this. That we have these kind of situations of Republican locations that are also helping fund Ukraine or well beyond that story. The reality that every one of these states have their own money pit profiteering elements that pop up when you want to look. If we had a similar wildfire ripping through any one of these states, I'm willing to bet you that the other side would be ripping through the problems. Maybe not even related to the fire, but the point is these things become focused on. Now, this, as Bread Circus points out, is Project Joint Guardian, saw thousands of pounds of essential firefighting equipment sent from California to Ukraine, which is ridiculous. Now, especially, which I actually forgot to grab that. I did have it for a second, but I'm sure you all saw it. The video of them using a purse. I find that almost hard to believe. That it'd be filmed, that they would keep doing it while they were filmed. I guess they're arguing it was taken out of context. The point, nonetheless, is that it's so overwhelmingly ridiculous to see that it's almost hard to believe, which genuinely should ask whether that's all part of some psychological game that's being played. But nonetheless, it makes sense when you realize this, that are we really at a place where you're sending over the things that we might need in the moment because of another propagandized element that, don't forget, both sides support Ukraine, that Trump already said he would continue funding. So we can't just pretend that's not part of the conversation. But here's what this is a news clip from NBC.
Of the profession, the turnout gear, helmets, boots, gloves, coats, the things firefighters need to allow them to do their jobs.
Well, Sharon, Micah, volunteers just got done unloading some 14,000 pounds of humanitarian aid. Now, it's being stored in this warehouse, which is just closed for the evening, but in just a few hours, all of it is heading to Ukraine.
Yeah, and this is pretty incredible. This firefighter is with the San Miguel Fire Department, and it all started with him trying to get firefighting equipment to the firefighters in Ukraine. Well, rather than just sending equipment, he thought, why not just go there to help?
Greater Los Angeles area where firefighters are now fighting 5 wildfires at once.
These are some of the scenes Los Angeles fire crews are dealing with, battling the Eden, Hearst, and Palisades fires. This, as most experts say, the staffing is not enough.
Fire experts are warning firefighter shortages are nothing new, and it is a trend that may continue.
Okay, well, can you guess right now what the Team Sport Trump side is not pointing out? How about the shot? Like every other field where they forced the shot on them. Well, a lot of them never came back. Police, firemen, government, military, or they're having heart attacks now, or they can't join. Like these problems are everywhere. But I guarantee you will not have that pointed out as a possibility from people that are supporting Trump, who tells you the shot helped everybody. Interesting how that part is not being called out. If it was any other context, they'd be the first to point it out.
There's a home that's on fire, and the fire chief that is here on the scene from another city here in California.
Here's another example I think is interesting. So the point, obviously, is that you have malfeasance here, right? What I think is obnoxious is the effort by people on the partisan sides of this to make it into something to take something that should be called out in its own right and then just kind of contort it into making it work for you. Like this is a perfect example from Starbucks here. So I don't think we need to explain what DEI is or the reality of my opinion on the show as we make fun of KJP almost every time I see her on the platform. And the reality being that that's an absurd concept, that it needs to be based on who is best for any position. That's always what the world should be like. But my point is that to make this about that, as opposed to the fact that funding went somewhere else, not where it went, but somewhere else, instead of firefighting, that's the story. As opposed to making it about what, like my example would be, I'm willing to bet you there are Republican states all over this country that did similar things for things Republicans support. And we just don't see it becoming a problem because they don't have a wildfire ripping through their state. But the point is they're doing that, diverting funds from things that might be needed for other social service or whatever else because of a effort to block something Republicans don't want. I mean, they wouldn't be calling it out. My point is what he's trying to do right here is make it about DEI as opposed to the fact that it was just funding that didn't go where it was supposed to. The story becomes DEI is killing people. Is that what's happening in the context of the story? Or is it just a lazy connection to the fact that the money didn't go where it needed to go for firefighting? It went to DEI stuff. So that means DEI killed people. That's ridiculous. That is an effort to try to patch together a story that makes it bad Democrat, woke politics, despite the woke right being exposed left and right today. But he goes, do you really think that DEI really made the damage from these fires worse? And he goes, yeah, I do, he says. DEI was the fire chief's focus and the department. Okay, let's just pretend that's exactly the truth. It says the city spent money on DEI while dangerous brush fires hadn't been cleared. Okay, perfect. Let's just say that's exactly the case. Is it the DEI that did it? Or is it the fact that they chose to spend money on something else? Now, yes, you could argue that DEI propaganda was what made them decide to do it. But it is still the fact that they funded something other than the firefighting. You could apply that to the same, I guarantee you could find other things they funded as well that might not fit the partisan narrative. Why is he calling those things out? No, it's because the one thing you want to sniff out is what works for bad guy Democrat, good guy Republican. As I can equally call out how stupid this program is and what they're trying to do. He goes, DEI is actually deadly. That's the part that made me cover this. That's just... It is about partisan agendas. Joe says, blaming DEI for the lack of water and fire hydrants when it's usually poor infrastructure and maintenance, that's to blame. I just literally showed you that, right? So also on top of that is the money that they're talking about in this one context is peanuts in regard to, I don't know, $500 million coming in for infrastructure. You see the point? So it's about trying to make it about something. That's not honest journalism. And it simply says, when California as a state spends in excess of $500 million on DEI instead of improving infrastructure, yeah, again, the point, though, is they got billions on infrastructure and went other places. That's a much bigger story than the one focus on DEI. That's all I'm trying to say. This is not an invalid point. The point is still they spent money on something other than the firefighting. But why isn't he pointing out all the other examples? It's because that works. It's not wrong, but that's the partisan game I'm trying to highlight today. On top of everything. Now, this person simply highlights objectively that they're probably not going to get help. despite what Biden says. He goes, have they fixed the water pipes in Jackson, Mississippi yet? Have they rebuilt the homes in Lahaina? Have they started to rebuild homes in Asheville? Have they replaced pipes in Flint, Michigan? Still, by the way, that's so, God, that pains me to even think about how dumb that is. They still don't have clean water, whatever. No, neither does half this country. Have they clean? I shouldn't say whatever. It obviously matters. I'm just so infuriated by how that, if there was any honesty in the controlled media sphere, well, we're seeing that's not true with Israel, but they would have been Flint, Michigan. People died or got severely lasting problems because of that. And nothing barely even happened. And on top of it, they never even got it corrected. That was just pure profiteering by the government. Have they cleaned up the chemicals in East Palestine? They barely even admit that exists. No one's even talking about Conyers, Georgia. If you live in California and you've suffered the fires, I have bad news for you. Is at least Ukraine and Israel got money. Now, Sal the agorist points to what Biden said. Now, until it happens, again, it's just words. But he goes, I'm announcing the federal government will cover 100% of the cost of measures to protect lives and property in Southern California for 6 months. I've told the governor and officials to spare no expense and do whatever they need to contain the fires. Yeah, that's outrageous. You know why? Because everyone's pointing it out. The obvious. He goes, some people in Florida and North Carolina got $750, but California will have 100% of their damages covered because they voted correctly. No, that's how he frames it. Now, yes, it's hard to miss that. It's a Democrat location, essentially. But there's Republicans and Democrats in both places. So I more so think it's about the political importance, right? For the long-term agenda. But either one works for the same point. I just think that it has to do with what's coming and California's central role in all of that. But either way, that's why I think that much money is dumping in these places. But it's absurd. They know you can say that let's just go ahead and say they flatly didn't help people in North Carolina. There are some examples of that, but it's still going on. Now, whatever you think they did in North Carolina, to come out to barely do it, they know they were getting criticized for it, and to come over the top and be like 100% of damages, it's almost as if, yes, we should ask, are we supposed to be upset about that? Well, and to be clear, obviously, it's upsetting. That's horrifyingly bad, but do they want us to react to it, is my point. I don't know. That's pretty crazy to me that it's that's that transparent. As Emerald Robinson says, hey, Donald Trump, Vance, which, again, they don't care about you. I know you hope they do. I hope I'm wrong. Says the Biden regime has left our people to die in Appalachia this winter while fully funding the liberals in Los Angeles. I just can't stand how it's always framed about the partisanship. And yes, that is clearly an element to this, but you don't know what's in their minds. Anyway, notice the difference. Biden says 100%. It is disgusting. And on top of that, I'm not familiar with the account, but just simply highlighting one billionaire couple owns almost all the water in California. Now, guys, this is an old story. We talked about the person in Texas that owns a huge portion. There's multiple states, if not, the water wars dynamic is not something to dismiss. It's very obvious how that resource is likely to be one of the next things that are truly fought over. Or at the very least, because of profiteering corporations like Nestle and others that are just straight up buying water rights from states. That's what Michigan was all about. They literally shifted into a bad source of water so they could make money, and nobody seems to care. But I think it's about a long-term agenda, and that these people know they can get away with it. But the point is that this is not unique to California. There are Republican locations like Texas in the same boat. But right now, it's only hip to point out the Democrat part. Hopefully, you're objective enough to see that it's just your government and that we're being pushed into some very dangerous positions right now. Now, on the idea of where this started, right now, I think it's important, and you'll see these all over, that there's a lot of videos, I've seen at least 4 myself, of random people that I verified are not some old video, because there are those too, as always, that are people starting fires, which is very interesting to me, because when this first started, what you got from mostly Republicans was that was fake, because that didn't line with the story that they were pushing. For example, this guy goes, fake news. Except now you can look at his account. Now he's in line with Jones, because that's the story now. So funny how the fake news becomes what you want to push the next day because your ideologues tell you so. But the point is that this was pushed back on early because it was about some secret long-term plan, which is still the way they morphed it into, that they just, I guess, paid homeless people to start random fires because the Democrats or because Great Reset, Sure, certainly possible. seems like quite a big chasm between what you think you can have in front of you and, proof, but so be it. The point is that there are people starting fires. Now, if you were just going to be objective about this, aside of the, longer, bigger, very something you should never dismiss, but the larger potential narratives that don't connect, you would go, well, that seems to be what started it. Unless there's something that ties, but I don't see that. Am I missing something? You tell me. So all you see in this guy there's a lot of these. I just use this to make the point. And again, the guy's not wearing all black, seems to be the big focal point right now, that they're all Antifa. Pretty much seems the opposite as far as I can tell, but wouldn't surprise me that's the case. And here you have Alex Jones. Arsonist confirms to have set multiple fires. Now, I think that's interesting because it started somewhere else. Now we confirm the arsonist, and now we just fold that into what we wanted to be the narrative. Same point here. Must watch, share, total proof the Democrat Party was responsible. Total proof. 100% false. Watch it. All you're going to see is a bunch of pieces of paper on his screen, on his desk, highlighting tweets of Trump and Nick Sorter and, and yes, very clearly showing malfeasance. That's not for debate. But the jump to conclusion is because they did this caused the bigger narrative. And what do you do right there? You skip right over what you could prove and what they should go to jail for. And point to something that may very well be the case, but you can't prove. And then historically, in these same examples, turns out to not be. And then you may ask yourself why these people are sort of obfuscating the criminals. Here he says, and this is just a perfect example of this. Let's watch this first. Here's what somebody reported. For the podcast, it says, thug tossing gasoline to feed the fire. It's funny how people get suggested into a video. All we know is that you got a guy filming in a car. Somebody's pushing his car in front of him, and this is where you can see the fire in the background. The guy grabs what appears to be a gasoline tank that pretty clearly seems to be empty and throws it on the side of the road. Well, I take it back. It looks like it might have something in it. You tell me what you think. Watch it again. Honk at him. They push the car forward.
How are they throwing gasoline?
That's it.
The fuck?
So, okay. That becomes this. And you can bet your ASS that the people doing this are communist Democrats under the World Economic Forum command. Do I really need to make fun of that? I mean, that is absurd. I think it's certainly not impossible. Of course they could be a Democrat or a communist or work for World Economic Forum. But think about how stupid it is to make that case based on that 3-second clip. And I put journalism in quotes. I mean, I just don't even understand how people don't make fun of this. He goes on to say, America's at war with the deep state. Yeah, you guys are literally fighting to get the deep state in control of our government right now. And he goes, the enemy's goal is total collapse of America. Well, you seem to be supporting that. Whether Zionism or technocrats or whatever else, the weaponized immigration, globalism, all things you keep screaming about seem to be literally on the team that you're all trying to obfuscate for. Either way, you can bet your butt that people doing this are communist Democrats of World Economic Forum control. You mean like Yacarino that works with Twitter that you support? How does that make sense? If it's World Economic Forum doing all this, how do you pretend Yacarino running Twitter with Elon Musk makes any sense? Or what about the shot they all supported that Trump supports that you still I mean, come on. It's transparent. I'll leave it here. There's no way anybody could watch that clip and know what the hell's going on. The guy throws a gas can. Yeah, it's stupid. Maybe he did it because he's an asshole or, a jerk. Maybe he did it because it was empty, wanted to get rid of it. And he's too stupid to know that that's actually a bomb. Like, realize the fumes of gas are the flammable part, right? So an empty gas can is usually, it's dangerous. Like, that's basically a bomb. So maybe he's too dumb to know that. Or maybe he threw it out there because he just wanted to make the fire worse. Either way, to jump into he's a communist Democrat World Economic Forum command is embarrassing. But it sure as hell works for the team sport narrative. In a similar lane, Truth Seeker says, anyone else besides me finds it strange that the woman who played Topanga from Boy Meets World was featured on a WWE Raw in LA, and the wildfire started in Topanga Canyon the next day? She's also doing a hand gesture similar to the Mahuka, the fire goddess. Coincidence? As always, anything's possible. And I wouldn't dismiss the possibility of them doing some kind of predictive programming because it's happened before. But my gut, I'll put this right along with the Maui blast, the Mountain Dew. It's just reaching. And until you find more, it's just a thought. But what's funny to me is how it's just like a lot of these things, takes over the conversation. If a partisan element like Jones decides to lean into it, it becomes the focal point. But all you have is a bunch of subjective connection that you're guessing at. That she was there, happened to be at Topanga County, hands in the air like that. I mean, maybe, but probably not. If you want to be honest about it, that's a huge reach. Of course, Twitter then does the community notes that says, if you or a loved one, this is pretty funny, views this is a credible thought process, please seek help. That's a pretty crazy community note, if you ask me. I've never seen that before. But I wouldn't say seek help, but it is there's nothing that connects these other than the, hand in the air. Here's you look for that connected with fire. Like that is you looking, that's called confirmation bias. But who knows? Consider everything. My point is that this is what we kind of see right now in this field. Now, here's a really interesting example that from the partisan side of this that I've seen. So Michael Yon comes out and says, the guy reportedly, and this is something going everywhere. I've seen Jones mention, I've seen a lot of these people mention this, a lot of huge accounts. I'll show you in a second. The article is homeless man with flamethrower, which is typical New York Post nonsense. It's a what do you call it? A torch. Like a cooking torch or like a torch you use in the garage. A flamethrower is an obvious way to embellish the way the story sounds. A flamethrower is not the same as a torch. That's like a backpack. It's crazy. Anyway, homeless man with a flamethrower busted in connection to LA's Kenneth fire after residents detained him. Now, this story is what's being pointed to because that's the guy they're referencing as a guy who was found with 5 cell phones and a United Nations debit card, which even in and of itself would not prove anything. It would simply be an indication of possibly being interconnected with the United Nations. And that would be the larger connection of the, sustainable development goals, the Great Reset, that whole thing. The same thing that Alex and the rest of them want to make about one side, even though they're all interworking with the people literally rolling it out. But the point is that it's gotten leaned into because it makes that point for them right now. To say the homeless Democrat communist is working with the World Economic Forum, had a UN card, therefore we know it all connects, which even then still would not prove what he's saying, but it would be interesting and there's clearly would be something going on there, right? Now, I can't seem to find anything anywhere about any of this other than coming from people pointing to these stories and not seeing it, and then people that are covering the same story and including that in the text because they say it. Typical, in my mind, how this works. And you're going to love how this ends. The guy reportedly had 5 cell phones in his name and had a prepaid debit card from the United Nations. He goes, I am in the United Nations headquarters complex in Panama right now. Share this everywhere. And he posted a video in Panama. See? Now, right there, I said, that's interesting, right? So if this guy had phones or a UN card, I would never, that's interesting. That would be something I would definitely follow up on and try to find out what's going on here, right? Because that seems to indicate, intelligence, at the very least, some, whether you're like a Soros kind of over like that, those are not something to dismiss. Okay. So interesting, right? So I wanted to dive into it. Now, right here, you already can scroll down in the comments and see how this continues, but we'll come back to that. Liz Churchill grabs a screenshot of the tweet. You ask yourself, why not just include the tweet, seeing as how that's not taking you off the platform. So it's not I think a lot of people are just so afraid to run afoul of the algorithm and the censorship that doesn't exist on this platform, not at all, even though it's everywhere, that they just try to avoid links and hashtags, and self-censorship is what that's called, guys, or just an effort to keep you on a very clear direction. The point is, she goes, nothing to see here, but UN committing terrorism. You base that off of a tweet with nothing to back it up, guys. That's the reality of what this is right now. That's 673,000 followers. This is somebody I'm following. She did work during COVID-19 that I thought was important. But we have to highlight any of this. The idea that you're jumping to UN committing terrorism, which the UN is a problem. But what I'm saying is, no matter who you're aiming at, no matter what your opinion is of them, that can't flavor the facts you're covering. So you're looking at him saying this, and you go, terrorism. Based on what? You haven't proven any of it. That's partisan stuff for you guys. And she goes on to say the climate change arsonist had a prepaid debit card from the United Nations. She says, based on Jan stating that. You don't know that, but now your million followers are all sharing that as if it's an absolute fact because that's how this works. Charlie, who has 20,000 followers, same thing. Screenshot. Guys, that's Twitter files for you. That's what the Twitter files did. Screenshots, it's all you need. It's engineered ignorance. More climate change, aka vulture capitalism, brought to you by the WEF. One of the, also the girl that runs this platform, though. But I guess we don't care about that part of it. One of the people arrested in connection with the arson attacks in California had 5 phones and a United Nations. Same thing. Truth Teller, who has 67,000 followers. Same thing, but way more detail, which comes from literally nowhere. Seeing as how this story comes from only Michael Yon stating that and pointing to an article that does not say that. He shows the article. He shows somebody else saying something about buying money, BlackRock looking to take vacant lots. Right, so a bunch of subjective points that come together as proof, apparently. Breaking news, because Michael Yon texted it and we haven't verified it. Arson suspect arrested a homeless man with 5 cell phones. The arrested part has been reported. The rest of it hasn't. Even goes on to use the flamethrower because that's more inciting. Why not release his identity? Recall how important it is to release terror suspect identities. So I agree. Interesting that gets held back when other times they couldn't put it in front of you fast enough. There's always agendas playing out, for sure. But to point at something not happening and means what I want it to mean, that's typical. The unidentified suspect was seen riding around his bicycle and setting fire. That's generally what the story is telling you in the article. And it just goes on to more detail about the money and, it's trying to build a case around one point. Now here, you can see this guy's Dutch has 127,000 followers. Same thing. Based on a picture, nothing else. Now, it doesn't even cite Michael Yon. Funny how he apparently wants to take credit for it, even though he hasn't even vetted it, even though it's not true. He says, arson suspect carrying 5 cell phones and UN debit card released. No charge. Okay. Well, maybe it's because ultimately it turned out, let's get into it. But the 5 cell phone UN thing is what makes this such an outrage. How dare you let him go? We knew what he was. I just really have to point out how upsetting it is that people like this with huge followings, who, by the way, didn't just come to this conclusion. This is nowhere other than Michael Yon tweeting it. And then people sharing that tweet with no due diligence and no other source material. And he decides to take it himself and share it. Like he broke the story. Now, how much you want to bet this gets deleted in a minute once this peters out? Or maybe not, because it's getting a lot of reach. We'll find out. Now, here's Breitbart doing the same disservice to you like the rest of them. Los Angeles Archbishop on wildfires. We don't know why these disasters happened. And just decides to include right down here. Or is it right here? Reports also suggest that at the very least, they water it down with we're not sure. But you wouldn't include this if it was this flimsy. To me, my point is it's coming from one person about something they heard, okay? And they just say, that man was found with a blowtorch, which is the accurate way to frame that, as well as 5 cell phones and prepaid United Nations debit card, leading to further question. That's it, though. And it goes on. Doesn't address it ever again. That gave it credence, guys. People are now pointing to the Breitbart article as they must have verified it because they pointed to it. Here's the article they're all highlighting, which you will not find an example of card or any of it, except the only card example you get is down here where it goes, he won't get off scot-free. Something like that. Automatic deductions off 15 each month taxpayer Visa card. Nothing to do with this. Not really. But read it yourself. There's not a single mention of the United Nations or a debit card, or any of that. So all Michael Yon was doing is saying, this is the person, and I heard this at the United Nations. That's what he said. But everyone else took it at face value. See another article, by the way, if you want to look further. This LA arsonist accused of starting fires in celeb enclave is arrested, but apparently was let go. You can decide why. That very well itself, outside of the other parts, could indicate that he was part of some larger plot. I wouldn't dismiss that, but I sure hope we have evidence to back that up before we start making that claim. Other than the fact that, like, here's what's important for the story. If you guys, sometimes I tend to go into these stories that have been going on that I kind of feel like you guys know, but I shouldn't do that. So the point is, this guy, you can see his image right there, was holding this little blowtorch. Random civilians saw him do it, decided to try to arrest him. Now, even right there, to be objective, you could argue that they misinterpreted something he was doing. But I'd find that to be unlikely. I mean, interesting. Clearly, they all seem to think he was starting fires. So, but to be clear, the way the partisan field is today, this was already happening, right? It's already building story. You've got a group of Republican friends out there that see a brown guy with a thing. I'm just saying, like, it wouldn't be that difficult to wrap your mind around them jumping to conclusions and then framing it the way they want. I'm not saying that happened. Just being objective to consider possibilities. Point is that they tackled him. They basically waited for the cops and they arrested him, found the torch. So gut tells me he probably was doing that. Especially when you bring it into all the other videos we have of random individuals trying to start fires. So it's either somebody's making this happen, which is certainly not something you should dismiss, or these are just random coincidences, which I have a hard time thinking that. But either way, the point is that this ultimately went this way, and then it seems they let him go. So unless you have proof or rather evidence at all to suggest that it was something more or that he was even starting those fires outside of what they said, the cops did the investigation to argue we know he got released because he's part of some WEF plan, that's the kind of lazy jump that Jones is doing. Maybe you're right, but prove it. Be better than that. Find the evidence and do your due diligence. Because if you don't ever do that, if it's all a big floated narrative, it becomes impossible to follow up on, and nobody gets charged with anything. Frankly, I think that's kind of the plan right now. Now, here's how this followed up. Okay, so remember, Michael says the guy reported had this stuff. And he goes, I'm in the UN right now, which I'm not even sure how that connects, but here, this is how he lines it up. So Polly, rightly in doing her job, she was reported by whom exactly? I'm trying to find the source, which I was too. Here's what he says. Might actually be partially fake news. Funny how that works out. And by the way, this is January 11th at 6:27 a.m. This was posted January 10th, so a day, essentially. And frustratingly enough, it took for her to ask that question for him to post that. That has to reflect on things for you guys. And he says, so might actually be partially fake news. KTLA did some of the reporting live. Other information came from inside source, but I cannot verify the verified source's source. My God. But the flamethrower appears to be cheap torch. So not even that was correct. And those are used by druggies. I do not know. In other words, we don't know. So basically, so he's basically saying some of the reporting is live. Yeah, the story that we all saw. Everybody saw the same reporting you did, Michael. The point is you heard somebody tell you, and maybe not at all, by the way. I don't know him. Maybe he made it up. The point is that it came from somebody's source who told me that. And maybe their verified source's source doesn't know. So it might, do I even need to explain? Secondhand information at a point like this and going back has become a huge story. Millions of reach, millions of followers, multiple accounts. Alex Jones talking about, yep, that's how this works, guys. And that's how it ends up, where it turns out to be, I don't even know for sure. Too late now, though. Now it's already gone the world around. What's the old saying, right? It's the truth will make it around the world twice before the truth can even get, a lie will make it around the world twice before the boot. I can't even talk right now. Let's do it. Third time's a charm. A lie will make it around the world twice before the truth even gets its boots on, or something like that. Mark Twain. And it's true, though, because people like this. Now, I mean more like Jones and the rest of the people pushing these narratives, but him too. And it gets spread. Now, interestingly enough, Alex Jones tweeting about this aggressively, which I don't need to harp on it, but just it's very transparent to me. Tweeting the same thing like 6 times a day with 6 different videos, all basically showing the same thing. Sharing that with your other account and you're spamming essentially the same information. The point is just to keep you're being bombarded. So he's coming out with the same argument. Globalist plot, World Economic Forum, ignoring all the other overlaps. Elon Musk does what he normally does and basically shares it with a right, correct, thumbs up, exclamation mark, whatever gets it 45 million views, basically with 0 engagement. But then he deletes it, which I do think is very telling. Elon Musk deletes tweet agreeing with Alex Jones that LA fires are part of a globalist plot to trigger U.S. collapse. Tesla billionaire and close ally of Elon Musk deleted and close Trump ally Elon Musk deleted a Wednesday tweet agreeing with Alex Jones on the stuff he's been talking about, suggesting they were part of a globalist plot. On Wednesday, Jones posted this. Breaking Elon Musk responds to Alex Jones' claim that about how Elon Musk leaning into it, but then ultimately deletes the tweet. I think that's super important, guys. I think what it shows you is that there are some things that go like, I guess the way I would have to read it is Alex is doing his own thing, trying to embellish and benefit from what's happening. maybe not necessarily all inner circle, who knows, and that just went too far. I mean, how do you explain that? Either way, I already highlighted the fact that there's a ton of partisan misinformation around this story, like there always is. And whether the ideologues are in charge of that or not, they still lean into it. And that alone should be enough for you to really question some of this stuff. Now, on this last point, Patrick Henderson made a really great tweet that I think is hilarious, that some people, like always, took at face value. But what this is meant to be is like an indictment of exactly what we were just doing, or what we were just highlighting, the partisan team sport politics media. And every time there's a story, the way that this compounds, the false narrative, then on top, a false narrative on top of false narrative that then makes sense of the next false narrative, and we haven't even proven step one. Every time. This is what he did. This is funny. So he goes, breaking news, Jeffrey Epstein was a secret Muslim. An island shrine the island shrine we've all seen was really a mosque. Sources on Twitter claim in viral tweet. Musk, Peterson are livid, now demanding Trump step down. Quote, Congress must be dissolved and national investigation held. Source, you are the media. Plus random Twitter accounts. Because that's basically what keeps happening. And I'll come back to that. And then Patrick goes, update. Story is double confirmed by MAGA Malaysia accounts. Latest update. Elon comments on the bombshell. Wow, insane. Same thing, right? Update. Story's been triple confirmed. Someone told us that Mario mentioned on Crypto Space that he saw the big story on Bricks News, another infamous misinformation account. This is huge. Source, you are the media now. Huge. Peter Sweden has viewed this tweet and believes it's very likely true, which is kind of what you get from them. I don't know for sure, but this looks like it might be something. Like, this is so lazy. So they can pretend like we didn't necessarily do it. It's perfect. Update. Pierce Morgan has viewed the tweet, believes it credible, promises to cover both sides of bombshell story. Update. Tommy Robinson supporters threatened to boycott Carling and Strongbow products until national wide-ranging inquiries held. Update. Wow. Just wow. That's Elon for you. And he goes, breaking sources at 23andMe were heard saying that Epstein's father is now part Pakistani. This changes everything. Source, you are the media now. Update. Jordan Peterson weighs in, upset, teary-eyed. This is not good at all. Like, yeah, it's really bad, but I could have been way worse. Update. Matt Wallace has copied our tweet and is now farming it for engagement. This is huge confirmation of our breaking news. Matt says, what do you notice about this tweet? It's so perfect. I really hope you guys see these things as much as I do. He is nailing this about each individual person and the way that they all grift. It's perfect. And he goes, huge development. Update. Not only was Epstein part Pakistani, but he was also practicing taqiyya in order to evade law enforcement. Crafty. Source, you are the media. Tesla owners. Then he goes, Tesla, there's all these Tesla accounts that keep sharing. It's just funny how they're all interworking on this. Latest, IDF has been brought in to help probe under suspected Epstein mosque. 7 Sharia courts are believed to be hidden below ground and connected by series of tunnels. If true, then this is a game changer. Elon's reaction, concerning. Source, Visegrad, still gray. Hindustan Times. Perfect. I mean, he must have mapped this out. Elon, call your MP and show them my tweet. Sources confirm that Elon Musk is about to retweet this story. If true, then that basically validates everything we've reported so far and makes this the biggest news story in the world right now. Wow, insane. Source, you are the media now. Note, Twitter is the collective consciousness of humanity's hive mind in all of these countries. That same image they keep sharing. And he goes, tech note, just to offset any negativity generated by the thread, as Elon has decreed, we must fulfill our freedom of reach obligations to promote positivity on Twitter. I'm dropping this algorithm-friendly cat meme. It just killed me. If you don't get it, it's probably not worth explaining. Every one of these are different characters within the, in my opinion, the objectively provable disinformation field of the partisan side. It's hilarious. But don't worry, Twitter fact-checked it. Fact check, Jeffrey Epstein was a Jew. And he goes up, I thought there was one that I thought he said something about the fact check. I guess not. Anyway, I just think that's funny. Because it really is like that, guys. It just cascades and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And just it all builds on top of it. And the game is that it's assumption, guys. It's partisan assumption on overdrive. But many of them believe they're doing what's right because that's the Twitter files and the rest of it. Like it's a dangerous thing. You could do whatever you want. No one has if you want to be subjective, that's your right. But don't frame it as objectivity. Right? Don't push these things as the new media when what you're really doing is lying to people in a lot of ways. And that's not everybody. It's not even the majority, in my opinion. So let's get into, oops, let me close these real quick. I want to keep those EPA things. I want to save those like I forgot to last time. Let's get into the obvious overlap to like the smart, one of the main things that they're talking about in the, like the reason why the World Economic Forum, global, all the plans they're discussing while ignoring it in all the main places that happening in the world, right? Like, you know, or rather other places, if you think this is part of it, is to consider things like this, like with Lahaina. Now, I just think it's important to highlight that you should not dismiss the possibility they're framing. Here's one of many. This is 2006. Los Angeles, United States, C40 cities highlights basically the plan, one of the plans for turning this into some kind of new smart city dynamic. Here is Greg Reese framing one about the future of 2028. The Los Angeles technology for a better Los Angeles. Smart LA 2028. Now, that's the same point people make about Lahaina, right? The idea there was clearly plans for the way they would redo that, and you should not for 1 second dismiss that might have been the reason if you think it was made to happen, which I think the evidence suggests otherwise, or why they might have leaned into it and not done their jobs properly because they wanted that to be the outcome. These are things you should not dismiss. But like everything else, we need to prove these things. And if you don't think so, then you're in the wrong field. Sassy Red Socks shares something that we talked about back with Lahaina. Just want to give her a shout out for it because she did a little video showing it all. Gives you the information from geoengineeringwatch.com. And that is the forest fire as a weapon document. Now this is the actual page. This is important to show you because this is on the official U.S. government website, or one of their official websites. This is the Defense Technical Information Center, the DTIC. So for those that want to, because if you see her tweet, people will dismiss it, right? That, which they shouldn't. That's their ignorance. But the point is, this is very real. Forest fire as a military weapon. So in conjunction with those two things, that still doesn't prove that because you see a fire and that makes sense that that's the case. That's the kind of the things we're seeing right now. But it does matter, and it's important. It could be. Primary research attention has been given to the flammability characteristics of jungle growth. Obviously, they frame it in a way to like go after their adversaries, but it's the same point. Now, we did talk about this. Here is the, I have it right here. What I tend to do for these, by the way, they have the PDFs you can download, but if you take the one they download, that link can be corrupted, right? So what I tend to do, here's the actual link to the website for the U.S. government. Here is the link to the PDF if you want the direct link that they have. I always download it and put it on my website. So my server has that. That's why it says the TLAV link up there, but this is the same one, just so you guys can see that. I've never really explained that, but that's why I do that. Because the point is, and I'll just do this so you can see it. These under this link could eventually be taken down, right? And it's the same one. So I do that so you guys have it saved on my server for just in case it goes away, which we know it happens today. But this is approved for public release. Distribution is unlimited. So it's not approved for public release at this point. So it's not something that is necessarily hidden, but it is important to realize it is a DARPA program. I find that's important with what's going on today, right? 1983, forest fire as a military weapon, 1970. Very important. Now you can read through this. I recommend you do. It's interesting. There's different things to pluck out of it, but overall, it's exactly what you think. Because they're not trying to hide anything in this, really. It's about, Vietnam or whatever they're pointing at. Like that was the mindset, the jungle, right? How do we use this to effectively win this war? Well, guess what? They see you as the adversary today. That's not even hidden. So very much worth considering how these things might come together. But still, as of yet, it would just be overarching points. I'll also include my discussion for Maui. Were directed energy weapons used in Maui? Let's take a look at what we can prove. Now, again, just like I've said in the past, demonstrating our value. If you look at the timing of this, August 12th, 2023, and what we're actually breaking down, which was the the energy directorate in Maui, nobody else was talking about that. Which then we got picked up by the Stu Peters of the world and tried to, cartoonish it for partisan work. But my point was it was still important to highlight that, even though my conclusion was that same thing. It didn't seem that you could necessarily prove that's what happened, and that has to matter. But the data points were there for those that wanted to try to connect those dots. Just wanted to demonstrate that for what we do. Very commonly ahead of the curve on a lot of things that are important for a story that very rarely gets highlighted that way. Yes, though, there were possibilities for that, but were they used? I don't think we can prove that. And that tends to bother people that just want to jump that last step. But talking about this, now this is funny. This was what's going around, stuff like this in regard to today. Look, it's a drone shooting a laser beam or like a fire stream on a tree, which is pretty obviously fake as far as I can tell. My point, though, is that obviously it could be. A drone can do any of these things, but I think it's really telling that we have the drone and the, all these overlapping things. It's just quite interesting to me. But either way, the point is that this is the kind of thing circulating that people then jump with. It becomes whatever you want it to be. This is something that I saw that I actually was going to bring up on. I'm glad we didn't. I was going to bring it up only as something that we haven't verified because it's interesting to see how it might connect with the fire conversation when I was discussing this with Allison Morrow, Smart Dust. But this is what you might have seen circulating. Jack Straw, who again, big account, says 286,000 followers, says turbo, like a turbo white phosphorus. And it says mystery explosions in the clouds spotted over LA. Was it experiment? Phenomenal. This is how this goes. Even though it's not what it appears to be. Watch it first, though. That's definitely weird looking without context, isn't it? To me, I'm going, whoa, thinking about nanotechnology, like maybe I would, because, I'm not going to dismiss stuff like that. But I will never take that at face value because that's ignorant. That's you're guaranteeing you'll be played like this. The video is from September, and it shows fireworks displays at the artist Kai Gao Kwong at the Los Angeles Coliseum. Look at it for yourself. And secondarily, don't ever take these at face value. Go further. Take the link, double check it for yourself, make sure even further beyond that. And you could look, and it is. So Jack Straw misled his entire audience, but got over 1 million views. So then it becomes a foregone conclusion that there's smart dust or whatever else. And that gets buried. So the smart dust conversation gets buried under that's all fake stuff because it's the Alex Jones effect. Again, this is what I see happening, and I think it's everywhere, guys. So just to quickly go through this stuff, this was something that was shared with me. I'll just include Elon Musk drops, this is from Lance on our comment section on our TLAV, says, Elon Musk just dropped massive bombshell on Tesla bots, Neuralink, major Tesla updates. I mean, it's all the stuff that Mike I was talking about is the Great Reset, but the good guy version. But Alice Morrow, and by the way, she starts in a really funny way. There was stuff before this, but it's basically she accidentally bumped herself off her own show. And so there's like the opening is like 20 seconds of me going, it's just funny. But she comes back on. The point is that we get into this conversation about the smart dust video, and I go through a lot of stuff I think is very important. Mysterious fog descends, internet abuzz about smart dust. Now, again, I think the fog was sort of a red herring. Other than, my point is the same stuff. People smelled stuff, all these different things. Nothing was proven to me. So I consider that they might have done something, especially with like the dioxin overlap and the releases, whatever else, even nanotechnology, but I don't think it's there. I don't think the evidence lined up. But what it did successfully do was bury the conversation of smart dust in a conversation that seems to be invalid. So this is what I keep seeing. And I'll really watch this because I go through a lot of important stuff in this. I'll play a couple of clips. I'm not going to end up playing the ones I was going to play over here. I'm going to go. I think what I want to do is going to this again in probably the next show, which I have some other stuff pulled off. But just to highlight this show is important. We go through a lot of stuff. Old videos openly talking about smart dust from 20 years ago, government projects, Julian Assange literally talking about evil smart dust. It's crazy. It's very much worth your time, and it's only 58 minutes. We go through a lot of stuff. But here we go again. Stu Peters. Look, trees untouched with, again, very well could mean something, but it's also what you see on basically every fire that exists in a place that has irrigation, that has water, trees that are wet. And my point is that he makes it out to be something that that is subjective, but he makes it out to be something provable, which is what he does every single time. And when it says California fires are direct energy weapons, smart meters, smart dust, HARP, right? Why not? Throw it all at the wall. Why not? Now tell me, let's think about this. Why would they need energy lasers, but then also smart meters to explode or to whatever we're talking, but also smart dust, to start fires over there while they're using direct energy weapons over here, but then HARP in Alaska and whatever else, we're using that too. Yeah, because it all makes sense, right? Because when you really think it out, they all perfectly work synergistically to make fires. No. Certainly you could bastardize this conversation. I mean, it's just, I don't even know I'm trying to make it make sense. It's dumb. Geoengineered smart dust is programmed to be for only burn X material. Now look, of course you could take something that is programmable. But to argue that you could make it only burn certain materials is quite a stretch, I would argue, but who knows? But the reason they're making this case? Because of stupid things like this. Here's Stu Peters again. Blue trash cans don't melt. I just don't understand why people take somebody like this seriously. It appears even the conservative circles are now pushing this. It doesn't matter. The point is, who knows why these blue things on the side of the road and concrete did not end up burning, which you can't even really tell how close they are perspective-wise. But the game they played during this came from one video, and I've showed you that twice. It is a video about a laser that can be set to certain lenses to not burn certain, and it was only showing you the blue not burn. That's all it was. It wasn't proving you that direct energy weapons don't burn blue. That's a really stupid thing to think, but it still got played by a lot of the same Jones and the rest of them, guys. Even though I can prove it to you. Here's the video. Watch it. Do your due diligence. Find the real video, and you'll find out that it was something that could be set. So the logic became blue things don't burn. And even if you're taking the video at face value, they could have made it any color. They could have changed it to what they wanted to, or any materials. But the frustrating thing about saying, look, here's a blue umbrella. Okay, so your argument is the laser that started the fire wouldn't burn the blue umbrella, or let's say the blue trash cans. Okay, but then the laser started a fire, and the fire burned. Are we to pretend the fire didn't burn blue things too? You see how dumb that is if you really just take half a second to think it through? Anything's possible, always. But realize how silly it is to make that jump. Just point out that there's also other things. Here's a brown object. Here's a green object. They don't show you that. It's just individual weird anomalies during fires. But consider that it might have been something else, but prove it. But this is the problem. So now these people out there make this story bombastically stupid. You're going to ignore things that that are real, like direct energy weapons, which are publicly real, but people still dismiss as fake, sort of like geoengineering, because of people like this. Now, I'm going to go over some of this in the next show. I just decided I really do want to do more on this. Even though we've done a lot, there's some important clips here. InfoCrypt, which I'm not super familiar with. He tagged me. I think this is an interesting overview. This is Ian F. Akalaitis from the NYUAD Institute from 2024. And he goes over the stuff we've already talked about, but more in depth about basically argues these things, nanotech elements, even uses the word machines, but he kind of uses those to overlap with biological things too, but references those inside the COVID shot. But goes over to highlight, this goes back a long way, and it's about the Internet of Nano Things. Grok talking about the biodigital convergence and how that works with mRNA. And that's important because this is the direction of the administration that's going right now. Now, of course, Elon stepping in going, hey, by the way, Grok can diagnose medical injuries. Hooray! Your artificial intelligence technocratic control structure can tell you what you have before you have it. Isn't that exactly what we were worried about under the other? Yeah, but it's Elon's. It's good this time. Don't think too hard about it. Internet of Bio-Nano Things, which is where we are, enables continuous health monitoring and smart drug delivery through intra-body nano networks. We're going to go into more. The point is that that's where we are. They're talking about this as intra-body net. That is right here. As Whitney's article from 2020 from TLAV. That's the in vivo nano platforms. That's DARPA. All this interconnects, guys, and they're all connected back to the same agenda. Coronavirus gives a dangerous boost to DARPA's darkest agendas. Elon Musk seems to be the face for this. Harvard with their virus-sized transistors, the conversation of the biodigital convergence, and what it says here, digitally controlled surveillance insects, microorganisms genetically engineered to produce medicinal compounds. Now, it's all about the future in 2022, but realize, guys, that's where they told you we are right now. Biodigital convergence. Canada had that document. James Corbett covered it. We've covered this many times. This is where we are. And I just don't know why conservatives, all people, can't recognize that the people they're supporting are driving you here. They're literally whipping you into this position. Now, lastly, on this point about the fire, this is what's so crazy to me. So Jesse Waters on Fox, which it depends on who you talk to. You know, one day they say something like, oh, he's a Fox Rhino, or the other day he's on our side. It's all over the map. The point is, he's on Fox News. He's a Republican. They're fighting for the same agenda. Fox's Jesse Waters calls for, quote, full federal takeover of Los Angeles with complete martial law. That's his quote. Now, yes, of course, people go, well, he says things he doesn't mean. Is that really your answer? that we just pretend he might be not being honest, but when he says something you like, it's always absolutely true without verification. That's called giving them the benefit of the doubt all the time because you're on their side. Even if he's saying this jokingly, let's just realize how terrifying this is. First of all, if you're talking about martial law, Biden is still in power. So was Jesse Waters calling for Biden to take martial law control over just California, if that's even how that works? Or the full federal takeover clearly, I think, applies to when Trump comes into power. That's probably what he means. But so now this is where ending. We're going to get into more in the next show. Are we really now talking about Republican takeover of Democrat territory inside this country? Even the idea being floated as a joke. I mean, you're flirting with Civil War stuff here, guys, and that's so ridiculously irresponsible. And it's just like, let's overthrow the UK because bad government. Let's take Greenland. Let's take Panama. Guys, it's stupid. And they're playing you. You're literally open. You got people screaming, yeah, take it from them. Gavin Newsom's a criminal. Yeah, he is. So are the other governors of Republican locations. So is Trump. So is Elon. So is Biden. Your government doesn't care about you. And all they want you to do is cheer on the agenda they lay out for you as yours. When really you stand back and realize that it's the same thing they're doing to all of you. And all you did was cheer on the agenda to subjugate yourself. John Colin points out, it's like martial law without the declaration. This is January 11th. Today. Look at all the Humvees, everything lined up. Okay. So Jesse Waters calls for martial law and then literally they roll out all these. I mean, is that not weird? Why do they need all of this? I'm just as concerned about that. Why is this necessary for what's going on? Now, hey, maybe, look, it's actually a good point to make for those of us that want to call out the malfeasance and lack of action. And then you see an overreaction. And they're going to go, well, now you're critical that we're working too much. Maybe that's the point, right? So then they literally were yet again calling for them to roll out the military. Think about that. Same thing, Trump and the rest, military, state of emergency, deportation. I mean, if you really stand back and look at this from a nonpartisan way, what's the common thread here? State of emergency, martial law. I mean, whatever it is, the justification to shut the, temporary state, roll out the military, it's the same thing. How much you want to bet there's discussions in this right now with some kind of digital overlap in some way? Do you think they'd even call that out right now? Probably if it's a Democrat side, maybe. Either way, I just really hope people are on guard because I'll tell you right now, this is wild. Not just the one location, the one topic, the whole damn thing. The way this is all playing out right now is pretty terrifying. Because it's not a joke. And you have people that are genuinely with huge influence or huge followings acting like it's a joke because it's funny or because they don't want you to look, they're defending their guy. I mean, we're talking about things that are real, that are changing people's opinions, that are acting, their foreign governments are shifting position because that's not a joke. So let's end with that. Even Frey put this out. And again, I'm actually not even sure whether he says down here, like, can't you tell I was just kidding? And I'm like, no, I can't tell. But the point is, to me, this is so stupidly obvious a deep fake. I'm surprised anybody took it at face value, but you can read the comments. People do. But I will actually say, when you watch on your phone, it's harder to notice the face, the mouth. That's obviously, like, you can tell, look, oops. That's so fake. Now I'll play it for you right now. So Trump, it says, Donald Trump reveals plan to annex Canada, which, this is kind of how this goes. It's interesting, right? So clearly he just said that he would use, actually, let me play that first. Here's what he just said in a recent interview. And this is even being promoted by people that support him. That guy, George, whatever, he's like, oh my God, this is real. I knew it. And so those trying to play this down as a troll right now are Trump, this is a real conference and genuine question. Of course, he could always be lying. But my point is, even if he's doing that just to get a better deal, the world doesn't know that. People could act in serious action based on these claims because it's a very big thing to claim. So even if it's a joke for a better deal or a troll or a ploy, it's so irresponsible.
Mr. President, if we were to work under the assumption that you're serious about making Canada 51st state of the United States, the leader of the Conservative Party in Canada said, under no circumstance will it ever be the 51st state.
Maybe he won't win, but maybe he will. I don't care.
You had suggested.
Listen, I don't care what he says.
But Sir Lopez, you said you were considering military force to acquire Panama and Greenland. Are you also considering military force?
So that's true, by the way. The fact that it's even being floated, joke or not, is wild. military force to take a foreign power. Yeah, that's imperialism, naked imperialism.
To annex and acquire Canada.
No.
Which, by the way, intersects very clearly with globalism, despite all the weird pushback from the Jones supporters. The reality is that it's one and the same, right? I mean, whether through conquest or cultural manipulation, both are happening. As Kirk and the rest are saying, like, we don't want anybody here, it doesn't align with our values, and then trying to take Greenland. Guys, that's globalism. And they're just so desperate not to highlight exactly what maybe they're being played. You know, I'm not of the mind that the Kirks and the rest of the world they know everything that's going on. They love to think they're on the inside, but they're the useful idiots of the Republican team sport side.
Economic.
Also considering military force to annex and acquire Canada.
No. Economic force. Because Canada and the United States.
So all you need to hear is economic force. So that's not a joke. So here is a fake video that went around. And this is my point about the way that this you could argue a Democrat did this to be funny, but I get more of the sense that this is a Republican doing this because they think it's funny too, or they want this to be the reality. I mean, you read it for yourself, but here's the fake video.
Of Canada, the Great White North, as they call it, except it's not so great anymore, is it? I call it the Great Sad North because that's what it is, sad. On January 20th, I will be slapping huge tariffs on all products coming from your country.
I mean, you get it. I don't have to watch the whole stupid thing. The point is that he goes on to talk about annexing Canada, and people seem to have fallen for it, which I really don't understand. Now, whether he did or not, he says, I can't believe Donald Trump would say this. There, I'll just go back and forth. But nonetheless, the point is, this seems to be real, right? Where this is going. So here's where David Icke highlights this. We'll pretty much end with this. I'll show you these last two things. So the point is that, well, actually, I'll play this first. That's kind of how we were going to do this. So David Icke has a discussion about what we just talked about, which, by the way, he's been talking about for longer than anybody. As Israel's globalist ambitions become clear, Team Sport Republicans endorse North American Union, which comes from the Sustainable Development Goals. That's the map right there. Comes from the New World Order dynamic. That's the map right there. Or the Club of Rome. I mean, all these we've shown you. Without question, Jones and the rest, they know about this. They were the ones pointing to this a decade ago. And now for the first time in earnest, it really gets presented. And it also, by the way, aligns perfectly with the TechNate map of the United States, which is Elon Musk's side of this. I don't know how anybody can ignore this right now. And yet, the most conspicuous example is ignoring it, right? It's like the guy who cut his teeth on the idea of these stories is now acting like it's not there. It's hard to miss. And here's how, as usual, David Icke called it out.
What is this really all a bloody bout? Well, I remember, because I'm old and I've been doing this a long time, back in the 1990s, when it was very much part of the alternative media analysis, that the plan was for a North American Union, a fusion of Canada with the United States and Mexico, basically mirroring the European Union. Because the more you centralize power, the more power the few have over the many. And the line was in the 1990s that this NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, was the stalking horse for eventually this political economic fusion of those countries. Now, here's another map which came out of the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome was created in 1968 to use concerns about the climate and the environment to justify centralization of power. And of course, they've done it ever since. And human caused global warming is all part of that package, that approach. And they came out with a map of how they wanted to break the world up into regional groups, which of course would be controlled centrally by a world government. And what did they say? They wanted a fusion of the United States Canada, and, oh yes, Greenland.
As Descended News points out here, as we were talking about in the last show, he kind of jokes saying, make the American technate great again, which people didn't seem to get, which is just silly how much people seem to misunderstand on this platform. It's quite how obvious it seems. He's making a joke. Obviously, the point is that this is the technate of America. That comes from Elon's grandfather and Technocracy Inc. This is the origin point, or rather the book. Nonetheless, this is the concept of the technocratic state. That's exactly what they're pushing forward. That's even the image that was used by some of these people promoting this idea. It just couldn't be more obvious. And by the way, even talking about Prospera or talking about the opening up of Greenland and new territory gives new light to this point. Here was 2025, January 7th. This was Trump. Excuse me. This was over a year ago, but this was posted recently. Trump over a year ago, as we've talked about then, proposing to build 10 new freedom cities across the United States. He said, this person says freedom cities. Is that just a clever way to say 15-minute cities, which seems to be somewhat the case? They compare it to Prospero, which, by the way, is a technocrat nightmare. It's not a libertarian city. I've talked about it a lot. I even reached out to the person that somebody knew because they were doing interviews, never responded. I wonder why. Because I even the answers they were giving, I could prove to you they were lying about it. Nonetheless, the point is here. Where else would these go, right? I mean, there's places you could argue in this country, but how about if you start recognizing that Greenland and all the rest begins this whole idea that would take over this country, I argue, at least his side, of the new frontier. They love the idea of Mars and, but think about that. All right, so they're rushing to do this for the obvious agenda of the North American Union, and then we'll sell it as freedom or, manifest destiny. They're already doing that. Very, very, very interesting. So we'll leave this there today. I obviously think there's so much more interconnected here. There's a lot going on that I honestly think most people see. I really think it's very transparent. But all I want is people to ask questions, be skeptical, even if you believe in them. That's the most important time to be skeptical. But I will leave this on the way out. We're going to talk about this more in the next show, the ICC, which is not new. I'm just trying these from the 9th. The House, as Massey pointed out, did one thing today on the 9th. We passed a bill to protect Netanyahu from the ICC. And then, of course, almost every single politician came out and said, I stand against the ICC. I stand with Israel. Like, while what's going on in the world? Like, try to make sense of that. They're not in some isolated bubble, guys. They see what the world talks about, and yet they choose to side with Israel. That's really not hard to understand. This is not some debatable thing at this point. The genocide's ongoing. The world sees it. And almost every U.S. politician is either so compromised, so blackmailed, or so Zionist, or so not American that they will completely stand up in your face and say, I support Israel, while they know that you do not. In what other world do politicians say the opposite, say to you as a voter what you don't want to hear? People that have an interest against that, people who are being funded to not do it, that kind of thing. But he goes on to say, I voted present. The ICC has no authority over the United States, but we should not get involved in disputes between other countries. Well, a little wishy-washy there at the end, to be quite honest, but I get the point he's making. It's kind of like the UN overlap. Like, there's worries to have about these international bodies. Nonetheless, if you really can't recognize that I don't see any other mechanism that's even in existence right now that might hold them accountable. So I would argue that the fact that, look, the point is not about whether you vote for the ICC in regard to the United States. It's about the idea that they're not voting against the ICC. They're voting to protect a war criminal from everybody, including the ICC. That's what your government represents. And at least Massey had the courage to just not be involved in that. But I would have wished, probably not vote. Anyway, what's funny to me is that you can see the Republican side of this now seemingly in some cases going after Massey, which I think says a lot about the higher level of the team sport politics. And you know what I mean. Either way, Massey's one of the only people that's ever called out the AIPAC situation. And now that's beginning to spin out. And by the way, we'll talk about that more in the next show, the overlapping points that I'm sure you expected me to probably get into today, the AIPAC conversation. Honestly, I don't think it's only a big story because it's got a lot of reach all of a sudden, but I do think it's interesting. Ian Carroll and the whole thing. We'll talk about that. Because the same point as always for me. I'm very skeptical about the way that's all going, just like with the US's Liberty point I made, that she did a great interview, but it's weird the way that works, how she can highlight things that a lot of other large accounts have highlighted many times over, but it suddenly becomes a story. There's something going on with that. Or why he can ratio Elon Musk about something that we've all been talking about. But who knows? Maybe it just happened that way. I'm very skeptical. My point, nonetheless, I even commented. I said, well said. Because my point is, even if he's doing that, or even if we're being played into some new thing, everything he said, I agree with. Doesn't matter that everybody else is, or that they might be using that. I mean, it doesn't matter, but whoever says the thing, if it's right, is right. Good said, well said, that's right. But I also I'm skeptical about a lot of things that other people are pointing out, or things that he hasn't said. And it's just interesting how people draw these lines. For me, it's about the facts. It's about the truth. The truth exists, no matter who points it out. So he says the truth, and the truth is that I said, good, that's good. It doesn't matter that he said it, right? Other than the fact that we need to continue to consider how the truth can be used against you. The truth can be weaponized, and always is. Just consider that, as we say all the time. And I'll leave it there. Thank you all for tuning in. Important stuff talked about today. I hope you shared this. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.